The Sorcerer, The Path to Transcendence starting from Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, Alien Land. Outside Washington, D.C., a group of superheroes stood frozen in place, as if under a spell, their eyes filled with shock and bewilderment as they stared at the U.S. Capitol, a city that seemed like a strange, otherworldly place. Is this really Washington? How is this possible? Are you sure this isn't a fairy tale? Peter, as if witnessing the most incredible thing, widened his eyes as wide as bells, his mouth unconsciously parted slightly to take in more of the absurd yet incredibly shocking scene before him. Looking up, he saw a massive dragon soaring in the sky, its wings brimming with light. Its roaring wind shook the ground as it passed. An icy aura emanated from its body, its scales gleaming in the dim light. Across the snow, nimble packs of snow wolves darted through the air, their deep green eyes striking against the white world. Their deep growls echoed, as if they were asserting their claim to any intruders. Creatures that existed only in fantasy and legend now openly made Washington their home, roaming and frolicking freely. Cool. This is so cool. Is this still the Earth we know? Someone, unable to contain their inner excitement, whistled a long, drawn-out whistle, a melody of wonder, excitement, and a hint of a lingering desire to explore the unknown. However, just as everyone was absorbed in this dreamlike scene, the hitherto silent Punisher's expression, as solemn as the leaden clouds before a storm, spoke in a low, solemn voice. This is not cool at all. Don't be fooled by appearances. These are our enemies. His voice was soft, but it struck like a hammer, hammering down on everyone's heart, bringing the heroes, now dazzled by the novelty, back to their senses. They realized the immense danger lurking behind the seemingly fantastical scene. Outside Washington, shrouded in the snow and otherworldly world, the atmosphere was as heavy as a leaden cloud. Jessica Jones bit her lower lip, her eyes grim and resolute. She clashed her fists together, a dull thud, breaking the silence. Our opponent is a wizard. Could all these creatures be his creation? Her words carried a hint of doubt, but more so, a sense of wariness about an unknown enemy. Who knows? A nearby hero shrugged, a look of resignation on his face. In this fantastical and absurd scene, everyone was filled with confusion. Guys, something doesn't seem right. Daredevil's body jolted slightly, his incredibly sharp hearing picking up the slightest movement. He subconsciously tensed his muscles, like a cheetah poised for action, ready for any crisis. Almost instantly, as if receiving some kind of command, the dragon soaring in the sky, previously aimlessly wandering, instantly locked onto the superheroes on the ground. With a powerful flap of their massive wings, they swept towards them like black lightning, carrying a biting wind. With astonishing speed, they closed the distance between them in the blink of an eye. They opened their maws, spewing streams of cold frost that shot down like sharp arrows, freezing the air wherever they passed. Get out of the way, a resounding cry pierced the air, and the superheroes, well-trained, sprang into action, swiftly dispersing in all directions. Their movements were agile and decisive, like a school of frightened fish scattering in all directions. With a stern look in his eyes, the Punisher tossed an incendiary bomb. It arced through the air, colliding with the oncoming frost with a resounding roar. In an instant, ice and fire merged, and steam spread like a surging sea of clouds, enveloping the battlefield. Fortunately, the superheroes' holographic goggles preserved their vision, allowing them to clearly see every movement around them. Seeing this, the superheroes hesitated no longer, each unleashing their full might to attack the soaring dragon. The Punisher knelt on one knee, his sniper rifle steady in his hand. His eyes behind the scope were as cold as a star. Bang! A bullet whizzed out, blasting a dragon's head with precision. But before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a strange scene unfolded. The wound on the dragon's head suddenly shone with light. In a split second, its head regenerated, intact as if uninjured, and it lunged at the heroes once again with its claws and fangs bared. Steve threw his trademark shield. It spun through the air, whirring with the sound of wind, precisely severing a dragon's wing. Before the severed wing even touched the ground, the whistling snow and wind around it seemed to come alive, rapidly coalescing into new wings, granting the dragon the power of flight once again. These aren't real creatures, they possess immortality, Steve shouted, announcing his discovery. Others followed suit on the fierce battle. We must find their core, or there's no end to this, someone shouted amid the chaos, charting the course for the arduous battle. Eyes. Their weak spot is their eyes. Then, in a flurry of attacks, one superhero accidentally struck a dragon's eye, only to discover to their surprise that it didn't heal as quickly as other parts of the body. Everyone cheered up, knowing the weak spot would make the situation much easier. The superheroes began to coordinate, some distracting the dragons, others seizing the opportunity to attack their eyes. After a strenuous effort, they finally defeated the dragons. No big deal. The young and energetic hero wiped the sweat from his forehead, a smug smile on his face. However, before his smile could fully blossom, it froze completely in the next moment. Looking up, swarms of dragons circled in the sky, obscuring the sun and oppressing the air like a dark cloud. On the ground, countless snow wolves, deer, and other unnamed animals glared at the superheroes with eyes emitting an eerie azure light, their gazes filled with cold hostility. The sheer number of them was despairing, an endless sight in sight. Even if these battle-hardened heroes were to tire themselves to death, they seemed unable to defeat such a vast army. Steve shouted at the top of his lungs, "Tony! We need backup." Roger that. A moment later, a deep, resounding roar, like rumbling thunder, spread from afar. 12 silver suits streaked across the sky like meteors, their metal shells gleaming coldly in the pale sunlight. They roared forward in a meticulous formation, instantly capturing the attention of everyone on the battlefield. These suits were the masterpieces of Iron Man Tony Stark, their every detail a testament to cutting-edge technology. Controlling the suits, Tony gazed sternly through the display screen at the chaos below. With a command, the weapon systems rapidly activated, their dense array of sensors accurately locking onto the surging swarm of fantastical creatures below. Swish swish missiles, wrapped in blazing flames, came out from the launch bay of the armor one after another, dragging long tail flames, like sharp swords piercing the enemy formation. Chapter 377. The ground was blanketed in a ferocious barrage. The blasts, like surging ocean waves, hurled snow and debris high into the air, forming massive mushroom clouds. Amidst the blazing flames, the dragons, once swift and fierce, were tossed to the ground by the force of the explosions, some even falling to the ground, writhing in agony. Snow wolves and other animals, frightened by the sudden and overwhelming firepower, fled in all directions, howling in terror. Under the relentless barrage, the once mighty force was reduced to a mere handful. Their bodies were battered and wounded, yet they still struggled in a last-ditch effort. Steve quickly assembled his forces to dispatch the few remaining ones. "You're too late," Steve retracted his shield. "No, I'm just in time," Tony retorted. Seeing this, Natasha shook her head helplessly and reached out to stop the two men's childish bickering. She spoke seriously, "Boys, I don't think now's the time for bickering. We have serious business to attend to." "That's right," Tony took over, pushing his glasses up with a serious expression. "Those were just the outermost monsters. The real trouble is yet to come." As he spoke, he expertly manipulated the high-tech equipment in his hands, instantly transmitting satellite footage to everyone's holographic glasses. The footage showed the streets of Washington filled with monsters made of ice. The most striking of these were the frost giants. They were enormous, radiating a biting cold. Wherever they went, the ground was covered in ice. Their hideous appearance and enormous size made even these usually fearless men shudder, sending a chill down their spines. Impossible. Some superheroes, observing the horrific scene, had already lost confidence. "Unless they use nuclear weapons," Peter muttered quietly, realizing his mistake the moment he said it. Everyone's eyes instantly focused on him like a spotlight. He looked down guiltily like a child who had made a mistake, pursing his lips and daring not to breathe. "Perhaps we can bypass these monsters." After a brief silence, someone offered an idea. "How?" Questions immediately erupted, and everyone's brows knitted into knots. "Draw the monsters out. These monsters have no intelligence, like pre-programmed robots," the person who made the suggestion patiently explained, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Robots?" Tony listened, shrugging thoughtfully. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a confident smile. "I have an idea." With a deafening roar, 12 majestic armors burst into Washington like meteors. Their bodies gleamed with metallic luster, and the exhaust flames from their engines illuminated the gloomy sky, instantly attracting the attention of the monsters below. The frost giants, sensing something unusual, roared in anger. They raised their spears, as thick as tree trunks, and hurled them with all their might at the armor. The spear sliced through the air, leaving a whirring sound, but the armor, with its agility and advanced intelligent sensing systems, effortlessly dodged sideways. After dodging the attack, the armors didn't stop. They quickly adjusted their tactics, dropping incendiary bombs from their underbelly weapon bays. In an instant, flames shot up into the sky, transforming a city block into a sea of blaze. The raging flames were accompanied by billowing smoke, and the scorching heat collided with the cold air of the ice monsters, creating a sizzling sound. The sudden attack and raging fire attracted the aggression of many monsters. They roared and rushed towards the armor with all their might. The 12 armors remained undeterred, coordinating their movements both on the ground and in the air, using flight paths and crossfire to methodically draw away the nearby monsters. "Let's go!" A deep, brief voice suddenly echoed from a deserted area, breaking the momentary silence. Immediately afterwards, a chaotic array of footprints appeared on the pristine white snow. Without a close look, one wouldn't even notice any movement. The antifreeze suits Tony provided also had a stealth function. Not only did they perfectly mask their own scent, making them invisible to even the most sensitive monsters, but they could also evade infrared detection and other high-tech tracking methods, undoubtedly adding a level of stealth and security to their movements. A team of 100 men moved swiftly and systematically through the icy landscape. They were divided into 4 teams, each led by Tony, Steve, the Punisher, and Natasha, 4 experienced and exceptionally powerful heroes. Along the way, despite the occasional roars of monsters and the crisp cracks of icicles falling from the eaves above, they managed to avoid danger. With their superb skills and tacit coordination, they gradually approached the White House. "It's no big deal," a California superhero muttered, warming his hands and stamping his feet to dispel the chill. "I hope I can get back soon. Damn this weather." Clearly, the warm, sunny California was a world away from the biting cold of Washington. He wasn't used to the chill, and even his words trembled. Natasha's eyes were sharp. She quickly raised her hand, signaling silence. Everyone held their breath, waiting silently for the signal. Just then, whoosh, an arrow pierced the cold and silent air, hurtling from the direction of the White House. The arrowhead flashed with an icy light, so fast that no one could blink. "I'll do it," a young, energetic superhero shouted, his blood boiling, determined to use his superior physical prowess to withstand it. But in an instant, the arrow pierced his chest with pinpoint accuracy, sending him flying backwards with such force that even the superheroes behind him, unable to dodge, were caught on the impact and pierced through one after another. With unstoppable momentum, the arrow blasted a massive hole through the building behind them, crumbling the wall and sending bricks and stones flying before finally coming to a stop. The terrifying force left many present with pale faces and weak legs. However, the nightmare didn't end there. Swish, 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 3 more arrows followed, roaring towards the crowd with a deathly roar. "Get down," Natasha screamed, her voice cracking, but it was too late. Except for her, who promptly fell to the ground, the rest of the group was wiped out. For a moment, the superheroes fell in a pool of blood, and the bright red blood spread wantonly on the white snow, like a bunch of tragically blooming red plum blossoms. The air was filled with a pungent smell of blood, and the scene was horrific. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 Usopp. The attacker moved with swiftness, and all 4 teams were simultaneously struck by this sudden attack. Steve, facing the rain of arrows, swiftly raised his signature shield. With a few crisp clangs, he steadily blocked each streaking arrow. He skillfully utilized the shield's curve and material to dissipate the immense force of the arrows, causing them to fall powerlessly to the ground without causing any harm. Tony's suit's state-of-the-art radar system played a crucial role. It accurately captured the trajectory and speed of each arrow. The suit's automated defense system swiftly unleashed beams of energy from various parts of the suit, colliding fiercely with the arrows in mid-air. The powerful energy impact instantly pulverized the arrows, each successfully intercepted. None managed to penetrate Tony's defensive perimeter. The Punisher and the defenders worked closely together to keep the arrows at bay. Only Natasha's team faced a critical hurdle, suffering heavy losses. "Are you okay?" Hawkeye's anxious, concerned voice suddenly rang through the headset. "I'm fine," But the others, Natasha's voice was tinged with fatigue and resignation. Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by Steve's urgent call. "Hawkeye, have you seen any enemies?" Steve asked loudly, his brow furrowed, his eyes filled with anxiety. In this critical moment, the superheroes knew that Hawkeye's extraordinary vision was key to their ability to discern the enemy. After all, his eyes were the best, able to pick up subtle clues in the chaotic battle and dim light. "It's a child with white hair, brown skin, black wings, and a flame on the back of his head." Hawkeye's sharp eyesight allowed him to clearly see the enemy's face even in the blink of an eye. He described him quickly and accurately, his tone tinged with disbelief. "He also has a strange long nose," Hawkeye added, trying to provide his teammates with more detailed information. "Kid, long nose, are you seeing things?" Tony grumbled bluntly, his voice carrying his usual cynicism through the comms, but now, beneath the playful tone, a hint of nervousness. As he spoke, Tony piloted his dazzling suit, leaping into the air without hesitation, attempting to seize the upper hand and dodge the relentless rain of arrows. The thrusters on the suit's back instantly erupted in flames, propelling Tony nimbly through the air. However, the power of the arrows far exceeded his expectations. They soared straight into the air, whistling through the thick clouds with a whistling sound. Tony was stunned. He hadn't expected such seemingly backward weapons to unleash such immense power. Even Hawkeye, one of the world's best marksmen, relies on a variety of high-tech arrows to enhance his attack and adapt to varying combat situations. Just as Tony was distracted, the figure of a child suddenly appeared in his field of vision. The child held a simple-looking longbow, aiming steadily at him, the string taut, ready to fire. Just as Hawkeye had described, it was indeed a child. It was the new Seraph, Usopp. Meanwhile, the high-definition cameras on the suits quickly transmitted live footage back to the superheroes, who, looking at their monitors, were astonished to see that the one attacking them was indeed a child. Tony's figure froze in midair, and he hesitated, unwilling to attack a child. But before he could even consider, Seraph Usopp showed no sign of holding back. His aura suddenly shifted. His armament haki wrapping around the arrow like black lightning, and he released it. This arrow, with unstoppable momentum and 3 times faster than the previous one, traced a dark arc through the air, hurtling towards Tony. Seeing this, Tony quickly controlled the suit to intercept. The suit's mechanical arms swiftly lifted, instantly raising an energy shield to block the fierce blow. However, with a resounding crack, the shield shattered upon contact with the arrow, scattering into countless shimmering energy fragments. Fortunately, the shield also slightly redirected the arrow, causing it to pass close to the side of the suit, avoiding a direct hit. "Sir, high concentration of energy detected on the arrow," the suit's built-in AI warned, echoing in Tony's ears. "Close combat mode," Tony decisively gave the order. Instantly, the suit's thrusters erupted with another surge of flames. The powerful thrust propelled Tony, like a cannonball, rapidly closing the distance with Seraph Usopp. He intended to use his close combat advantage to suppress the troublesome child. Seeing Tony charging, Seraph Usopp calmly drew the dagger from his waist. The blade gleamed with a cold light, contrasting with the flames surrounding him, making him look particularly cold and brutal. Ding, ding, Tony unleashed a barrage of attacks from the suit, from fierce punches to sweeping energy beams, each one precisely blocked by Seraph Usopp's dagger. Sparks flew from the collision of the dagger and the suit, illuminating the surrounding airspace. "Sir, the opponent has some kind of predictive attack capability," the intelligent AI warned again. "I know, speed up," Tony gritted his teeth, a look of determination in his eyes. "Your body can't handle it," the AI tried to dissuade him. After all, such a high-intensity attack mode would be extremely taxing on Tony's body. "Remove the restrictions," Tony ordered without hesitation. With the input of the command, the suit's attack speed increased rapidly again, punches roaring, energy beams crisscrossing, and the entire airspace was illuminated with a dazzling array of colors. Yet, Seraph Usopp maintained a flawless defense. His nimble, ghost-like form deftly maneuvered through the torrent of attacks, his dagger wielding impenetrable, each block perfectly timed to prevent Tony's attacks from finding a flaw. Go, the Punisher, with his keen eyes, instantly sensed this golden opportunity. While the enemy was held captive by Tony's fierce aerial battle, he charged in without hesitation. Where the White House had been, a massive hole had been ripped open by lightning. Those dark openings seemed like passages to an unknown world, and no one knew what lay beneath. The walls bore traces of scorched earth from the lightning strikes. Chapter 379 Sandbag. To investigate, someone dropped a flare. It slowly descended, trailing a long tail. After a long pause, everyone waited anxiously, their hearts in their throats. But with the flare's light, they finally saw there was no trap. "It's so deep beneath the White House," someone exclaimed, their voice filled with surprise and confusion. "Why bother?" An impatient superhero leaped down, and Steve, worried about him, followed suit. After a moment, a voice came through the headset. "Guys, I think you need to come down and take a look." The Punisher and Natasha exchanged glances and leaped down as well. Seeing this, the other superheroes followed suit, sliding down the cave wall. At first, it was pitch black, as if shrouded by darkness. As they went deeper, they gradually began to see light. Once they found their footing, their jaws dropped. "Where is this?" The surroundings startled everyone. The underground world was a world apart from the surface. It was warm, as if spring had lasted forever, and even blossomed with flowers and plants, creating a serene paradise. Moss covered the stone walls, emitting a faint glow that illuminated this subterranean world. Strange creatures of all shapes and sizes appeared. Some sported transparent wings, shimmering in the dim light like elves. Others were tiny yet incredibly agile, darting among the flowers and plants like nimble dancers. "What the hell is going on?" The superheroes froze, unsure what to do. "Don't panic. The enemy might be observing us from the shadows." Steve held his shield in front of him and glanced around warily, his eyes filled with caution. "Do any of you have detection abilities?" "Me," Peter excitedly declared, raising his right hand. "I can anticipate danger," and, as he spoke, tiny spider robots crawled out of his armor. "They can help us explore the way." "Okay, you and I will go ahead," Steve instructed. "Be careful, we never know what will happen." Led by Steve and Peter, the superheroes cautiously made their way deeper into this mysterious underground world. Every step was filled with uncertainty and challenges, like walking on a tightrope. Bang! A muffled sound exploded like thunder. Tony's iconic iron armor was blown away uncontrollably like a kite with its string cut. After tracing a chaotic arc in the air, it slammed heavily to the ground. "Damn, is this kid made of iron?" Tony muttered, hiding in his armor, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. He felt a surge of pain within him, and every breath was accompanied by a sharp, stabbing pain. It felt like his internal organs were bleeding. The excruciating pain turned his face as pale as paper. "You're quite the fighter, Tin Can." The previously silent Seraph Usopp spoke for the first time. His voice, childish yet full of arrogance, carried clearly through the gusting wind to Tony's ears. "A good punching bag," he said, his lips curling up slightly in a mocking smile. He toyed with a longbow in his hand, as if the blow that had just sent Tony flying was a piece of cake. "Sir, the suit is 70% damaged," the calm electronic voice of Jarvis, the suit's built-in intelligent AI, chimed in, reporting the damage to Tony. "Shut up, I know," Tony exhaled impatiently. He was exhausted and wanted only a brief moment to relax, calm the surging pain in his body, and regulate his chaotic breathing. However, Seraph Usopp would not let him go so easily. He didn't even give him a chance and immediately activated his ability. Instantly, the surrounding light seemed to be absorbed by the longbow in his hand. A dazzling radiance quickly converged, and an arrow of pure light was placed on the bow, emitting a dazzling brilliance, as if condensed with the essence of the sun. Tony's heart tightened at the sight, and a strong sense of danger washed over him. Before he could react, Seraph Usopp released the bowstring. With a resounding boom, the arrow of light, like a falling meteor, struck Tony's armor with unerring precision, carrying the force of destruction. Under the terrifying impact, the steel armor was completely vulnerable, instantly melting under the intense heat, turning it into a pool of molten iron. Fortunately, Tony's reaction was quick. In the moment of danger, relying on the instincts cultivated by years of combat, he quickly disengaged from the armor and avoided being melted together. He stumbled to the ground, fell to one knee, and gasped for breath. "Jarvis!" Tony cried out, fighting back the excruciating pain. "Roger that." In the sky, a spare suit, already on standby, ignited its thrusters and, like a flash of silver lightning, hurtled towards Tony. Tony had been thoroughly prepared for this battle, deploying several spare suits around him in case of emergency. However, Seraph Usopp clearly had no intention of stopping. As the new suit flew over to Tony, before he could even finish dressing, he raised his hand and drew his bow. Bang! Another arrow blasted out, whistling with the wind, aiming directly at Tony, who was still getting dressed. This one was equally powerful, instantly destroying the suit, which hadn't yet fully activated. Shattered parts flew everywhere, creating craters of varying depths in the ground. Damn it! Release them all. Tony was completely enraged, his eyes red as he gave the order without hesitation, like a wounded beast gone mad. As the command was issued, the Iron Legion, hidden behind the clouds, received the signal and surged into Washington's airspace. HMPH, Seraph Usopp observed the overwhelming Iron Legion, his face devoid of fear, only a sneer of disdain. He leaned back slightly, his arm muscles tensed, and launched another arrow. This arrow, with unstoppable momentum, hurtled straight towards the Iron Legion's camp. A figure clad in pitch black, slightly heavy armor, like a black wall, swiftly rushed to the front of the column and blocked the arrow. After the violent explosion, the black armor remained remarkably unscathed. Interesting, Seraph Usopp's eyes flashed with surprise, but he quickly regained his cynical expression, seemingly unfazed by the minor incident. In the blink of an eye, Tony was already donning a brand new set of armor. Let's see how arrogant you are, little brat. Tony clenched his fists and launched the armor into the air. Chapter 380 Emergency. A cold glint flashed in Seraph Usopp's eyes. He flapped his dark wings behind him, a powerful blast of air erupting as he hurtled towards Tony like an arrow. This isn't scientific. Tony's eyes widened, his face filled with astonishment as he watched the soaring Seraph Usopp approach. In his mind, the Seraph's wings were merely decorative, though useless. After all, whether based on rigorous physics or biological knowledge of the weight-bearing capacity of wings, the size, structure, and material of those wings simply couldn't possibly support the weight of a human. But the sight before him slapped him in the face. Seraph Usopp's speed was lightning fast, catching up to Tony in an instant. At that moment, the Iron Legion, receiving the command, reacted swiftly. Missiles, swirling with smoke and flame, and lasers brimming with deadly energy, rained down upon Seraph Usopp, intent on stopping him. However, Seraph Usopp's nimble form twirled through the air like a fluttering butterfly, nimbly dodging the missiles and lasers, none of them striking him. Seeing their conventional attacks ineffective, three armors rapidly launched into the air in a triangular formation, attempting to intercept Seraph Usopp's path through close coordination. But just as the two were about to make contact, a dazzling lightsaber, as if condensed from star fragments, appeared in Seraph Usopp's hands. With a few resounding cracks, the three armors clashed, neatly cleaving in half, their shattered parts showering down with sparks. Not all armors possessed the defensive power of the black suit. That suit was crafted entirely from an extremely rare form of vibranium. Its unique molecular structure endowed it with exceptional toughness and defense, capable of absorbing and dissipating most impacts, making it virtually indestructible. But this rare material was too expensive. Even with Tony's wealth, even with countless efforts, he could only create this one set. "Don't let that lightsaber hit you," Tony shouted over the comms channel. At the same time, the black armor quickly blocked Seraph Usopp's way. Seraph Usopp slashed down with his lightsaber, but it seemed as if he had hid an invisible wall. He frowned slightly, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Interesting material, he could clearly feel his attack being completely neutralized, like a drop in the ocean. Instantly, a thought flashed through his mind. Lord Erwin would be interested. Seraph Usopp set his sights on the black armor, wanting to capture it and present it to Lord Erwin. However, first, he had to deal with the annoying Iron Legion before him. Seraph Usopp drew his bow again. Light arrow rain. As the bowstring was released, countless arrows of light instantly unleashed from the longbow, a dense mass that rained down upon the Iron Legion like a torrential downpour. For a moment, the sky was ablaze with light, and explosions echoed one after another. The attack was so powerful that it knocked down several armors, instantly shattering the Iron Legion's formation. Fortunately, Tony, protected by his black armor, managed to survive. Hiding behind his black armor, he surveyed the horrific scene on the battlefield, thinking to himself, if this continues, the armor will be completely consumed. The situation was critical, and no time could be lost. Tony acted decisively, swiftly changing his tactics. Instead of gathering together in their previous, large, clumsy attack clusters, the Iron Legion dispersed according to preset tactical procedures. The dispersed suits exploited their mobility to engage Seraph Usopp in the air, sometimes launching flanking attacks, other times maneuvering around him, attempting to pin down this formidable foe with a variety of tactics, buying Tony more time to formulate a countermeasure. "I've been underestimated," Seraph Usopp snorted inwardly. Seraphs are not only immensely powerful, but also possess intelligence far superior to that of ordinary humans. This is thanks to the fact that Weiss had implanted the art of war and 36 stratagems into their memories when they were created, allowing the Seraphs to flexibly employ a wide variety of tactics in battle. Seraph Usopp knew that Tony was the primary target on the battlefield. The remaining suits, though numerous, were merely minor nuisances to him, to be temporarily ignored. He had already used his observation haki to firmly locate Tony's position. His perception enveloped the entire area within a 10-kilometer radius, capturing Tony's every move, even the slightest fluctuation in his breathing. However, just as he was about to launch another attack, he was suddenly surprised to discover, it's vanished. Tony's presence, once so clear it seemed close at hand, vanished in his observation haki in an instant. That armor actually blocks observation haki. Seraph Usopp's heart trembled slightly, but he didn't panic at all. Instead, a glint of excitement flashed in his eyes, and his interest in the battle grew even more intense. "No wonder the master told me to pay special attention to this guy," he muttered to himself, his regard for Tony increasing even more. In his eyes, Tony had risen from an ordinary opponent to a serious enemy. "In that case, let's destroy this area completely." Seraph Usopp's eyes revealed determination and ruthlessness. He wrapped his Conqueror's haki around his right hand and raised it high. His arm seemed to be shrouded in a purple-red light, emitting a terrifying aura. Then, it slammed down hard into the ground. In an instant, like a terrifying earthquake, the earth trembled violently, and deep cracks spread like spiderwebs, as if the ground were groaning in pain. All around, buildings collapsed, and debris poured down like a torrential rain. Tony, relying on the suit's sophisticated sensor system and his years of combat experience, nimbly controlled the suit, sometimes sidestepping around a huge floor slab, sometimes rapidly ascending to avoid a fallen stone pillar. The suit's thrusters emitted a powerful airflow, emitting a humming roar, helping him to maneuver freely in this dangerous environment. There, Seraph Usopp's sharp eyes, like a hawk, instantly penetrated the layers of smoke and dust and locked onto Tony, who was dodging the buildings. His eyes sharpened, and without hesitation, he drew his bow and arrow. The tip of the arrow shimmered with light, condensing a powerful and domineering energy. He released his finger. Whoosh, like a meteor streaking across the sky above the ruins, with a whistling sound of wind, it headed straight for Tony. Chapter 381 Intelligence. "Sir," the piercing voice seemed to pierce the chaotic din, reaching Tony's ears. However, the situation was now extremely critical. The arrow in Seraph Usopp's hand was like a bolt of black lightning, carrying a fierce murderous intent, streaking towards Tony at an unimaginable speed. Its speed was so fast that it could tear through the air. In the nick of time, it was about to hit its target with pinpoint accuracy, but Tony, still pinned down by the mountain of rubble in his black armor, had no time to protect him. Seraph Usopp's mind clearly envisioned the tragic scene of Tony's body being ruthlessly pierced by the arrow, and the corners of his mouth even curled up slightly. But just as the arrow was about to reach Tony, a cold flash of light shot from the side. With a whoosh, another arrow accurately hit Usopp's arrow, the impact causing both arrows to change direction instantly. Usopp's arrow pierced several buildings before disappearing into the distance. Anyone else? Seraph Usopp whipped his head around, following the arrow's trajectory, his eyes filled with alarm and confusion. However, he saw no sign of anyone. He even activated his observation haki to the fullest, trying to sense every movement around him, but strangely, he detected nothing, as if the arrow had simply appeared out of thin air. HMPH. Hiding your head, revealing your tail, Seraph Usopp snorted, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. He quickly drew his bow and unleashed an arrow, unhesitatingly aiming it in the direction he thought someone might be hiding. As the arrow shot out, the air seemed to rip apart, a buzzing sound echoing. A transparent silhouette slowly emerged, another armor hidden in the shadows. "Thanks, Clint," Tony said gratefully, relieved at the sight of the armor. "Too bad I'm exposed," Clint's voice echoed from within the armor, a hint of resignation. It turned out that besides Tony, Hawkeye had also remained, cleverly concealing himself in the shadows of the battlefield, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Their carefully crafted plan had Tony drawing enemy fire from the open, creating the perfect opportunity for Hawkeye to launch a surprise attack. But this sudden change completely disrupted their plans, causing Hawkeye to prematurely reveal his position. Hawkeye? Seraph Usopp stared at Hawkeye, his eyes filled with disdain. One of my companions is called Hawkeye, but you're much weaker than him, really? Hawkeye's mind struck, keenly sensing this opportunity to extract information. He calmly asked, is your companion as formidable as you? About the same. Seraph Usopp knew Hawkeye was trying to extract information, but he didn't care. After his recent battle with these men, he was certain they were no match for him. What good would it do if they learned some information? Are you skilled in archery, too? Seraph Usopp asked, secretly observing Hawkeye's every move, bow and arrow gripped tightly in his hand, ready to respond to any possible attack. A little bit, Clint replied modestly, but his movements were unwavering. In the pause between words, he swiftly bent his bow and released 3 arrows in quick succession. With a sharp whistling sound, the 3 arrows flew towards Seraph Usopp, each one precisely aimed at his vital points. Good accuracy, but too little power, Seraph Usopp commented calmly, his body moving like a ghost, effortlessly dodging the 3 arrows. Then, he pushed off the ground with his right foot, leaving a shallow footprint beneath his feet. With this powerful burst of force, his body, like a black whirlwind, instantly broke through to Hawkeye's right side. Your close combat abilities are too weak, Seraph Usopp said coldly, raising his right leg high before sweeping across with a whirring sound. Hawkeye was horrified upon seeing this, and hurriedly rolled on the ground in a panic, barely dodging the blow. But before he could stand up, Seraph Usopp's right foot had already stomped down hard, about to step on Hawkeye. The Hulkbuster arrived in time, blocking Hawkeye's way and shielding him from the fatal blow. Hawkeye took the opportunity to distance himself from Seraph Usopp, and at the same time, he quickly drew an arrow, put it on the bow, and pulled hard. As the explosive arrow exploded next to Seraph Usopp, the huge impact force stirred up a cloud of dust and sand, and the surrounding air seemed to be instantly ignited, with a wave of heat. However, as the smoke gradually cleared, a shocking discovery was revealed: Seraph Usopp, standing unharmed. His figure, illuminated by the firelight, appeared remarkably calm, even a faint, mocking smile on his face. Your armor is much more interesting than a pacifist's. Seraph Usopp raised his head slightly, a hint of admiration in his eyes, as he praised Tony. Another new piece of information, a wary thought flashed through Tony's mind. That means Weiss has other helpers. His mind, like a whirring machine, continuously combed and analyzed the available intelligence, trying to find the enemy's weaknesses or exploitable flaws. However, the deeper he pondered, the more dire the situation became, and the results he reached made his brow furrow. This was not a good situation. Tony took a deep breath, focused his attention, and slowly pulled the black armor out from under the rubble. He looked at the Hulkbuster armor, already tattered after only a few rounds under Seraph Usopp's hands, and groaned inwardly. At this point, the only option was for the black armor to hold the line, hoping to temporarily withstand Seraph Usopp's fierce attack and buy more time to formulate a countermeasure. The black armor's leg thrusters instantly erupted with a faint blue flame, and like a flash of black lightning, it hurtled towards Seraph Usopp. Its right fist rose high, slamming down with a whirring sound. Seraph Usopp, however, remained calm, nimbly sidestepping and easily avoiding the devastating blow. At the same time, he quickly drew his longbow to full length, and a gleaming arrow instantly released, whistling with a sharp sound, heading straight for the black armor's head. The vibranium dissipated the arrow's force, leaving the black armor unscathed. The rotating turrets at its waist activated, and several small missiles roared out, arcing through the air and enveloping Seraph Usopp. Seeing this, Seraph Usopp raised the corners of his mouth slightly, pushed off the ground with his feet, jumped high, and flipped in the air like a nimble swallow, cleverly avoiding the attack range of the missile. Chapter 382 Candy House. After landing, Seraph Usopp drew his bow again. This time, 3 arrows were released in a fan-shaped pattern, aiming at the black armor's legs, chest, and arms, forcing the black armor to divert its attention to defense. A direct attack. HMPH. I don't believe this material has no limits. He swiftly channeled his armament haki into his arms. In an instant, his arms seemed enveloped in a deep black aura. Muscles tensed, veins bulged, and every inch of his skin radiated a chilling sense of power. Then, with lightning speed, he lunged towards the black armor. Bang, bang, flesh and machine collided with a dull, resonant sound, and each impact sent ripples through the surrounding air. His speed increased, his arms waving rapidly in the air, leaving behind a trail of afterimages that were dazzling to the eyes. Not to be outdone, the black armor immediately adjusted its tactics, strengthening its defenses to meet this even more ferocious attack. A few seconds later, Usopp suddenly turned and retreated swiftly. A subtle flicker of surprise flashed across his eyes. Clearly, his recent furious assault had been fruitless, forcing him to reassess the black armor before him. Interesting, he whispered softly, a hint of amusement in his voice. Then, with a swift movement of his hands, the surrounding photons, as if summoned by some powerful force, began to rapidly gather and compress. In a mere moment, they coalesced into a faintly glowing rope. As if alive, the rope snaked towards the black armor, instantly binding it tightly. The black armor's engines roared deafeningly, and its joints twisted desperately, trying to break free from the sudden restraint. However, no matter how hard it struggled, the photon rope remained motionless, tightly wrapped around it, preventing it from moving. Sure enough, only its defense is worth mentioning. Usopp snorted disdainfully, his gaze passing past a black armor to Hawkeye and Tony nearby. Tony's brow furrowed, his eyes etched with solemnity and anxiety. Hawkeye, bow in hand, hunched slightly, his eyes warily watching Usopp's every move, his bowstring half drawn, ready to strike. Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve? Usopp held his head high, his voice filled with defiance, declaring to Tony and Hawkeye their own weakness and his own strength. Tony and Hawkeye exchanged a quick glance, their eyes mingling with worry and helplessness, each tacitly understanding that the situation ahead would be extremely difficult. Hold him off, buy the captain some time, Hawkeye broke the silence, his voice low but firm. That's the only way, Tony gritted his teeth, echoing. Piloting their respective suits, the two men, like two nimble cheetahs, cut through the air in dazzling arcs, intertwining and swiftly charging towards Usopp, attempting to tie up the formidable foe through close coordination and buy Steve crucial time to act. Meanwhile, in the mysterious underground world, Steve and Peter cautiously walked at the front of the group, each step carefully considered, their eyes warily scanning their surroundings. Strangely, nothing unusual happened along the way, the silence was almost unsettling. Initially, they worried that the seemingly ordinary flowers and plants around them, or even the occasional small animal that popped up, would transform into ferocious monsters and attack them. So, even though everything seemed calm, they treaded on thin ice. Inching forward cautiously, their nerves tense to the bone. Soon, a small house suddenly appeared in their sight. It was made of colorful candies, exuding a strange, dreamlike aroma. Even before they approached, they could smell the sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance from afar, lingering in the air. Something was wrong, something serious. In such a strange and unknown underground world, the sudden appearance of such a strange candy house would have any reasonable person keenly sensing a hidden secret. What should we do? Peter asked his teammates in a low voice, a hint of nervousness and confusion in his eyes. This is too suspicious, the Punisher murmured, weapon tightly gripped, ready for any possible danger. At this point, most of the team preferred to avoid the candy house, avoiding any unknown trap. However, Natasha had a different opinion. The enemy has extended an invitation, how can we refuse? Without hesitation, she strode towards the candy house, her steps light yet undeniably determined. Steve, Peter, and the Punisher exchanged glances before finally following Natasha, slowly approaching the mysterious candy house. As they drew closer, the sweet aroma grew stronger, as if an invisible hand gently tugged at their sense of smell. Gurgle, gurgle, suddenly, Peter's stomach growled at an inopportune moment, the sound piercing the silence. His face flushed crimson, and he scratched his head sheepishly. He was in a period of rapid growth and development, and the intense journey had consumed him greatly. It was natural to feel hungry. Natasha approached the cabin door, adjusted her clothes slightly, then politely extended her hand and knocked gently. With a soft, gentle creak, the door slowly opened, revealing a seemingly innocent little girl. A warm smile graced her face, and she cheerfully greeted, "Guests, please come in." However, Peter's spider sense, like an electric current, coursed through his body, warning him frantically, this little girl was more than she seemed. She possessed a terrifying, unsettling aura. "Excuse me," Natasha bowed slightly, a perfectly composed smile on her face, and she politely greeted the little girl. Her eyes darted quickly over the little girl, trying to find any flaws in her expression or demeanor, but she seemed so innocent, so elusive. "What's your name, little sister?" Natasha asked calmly, her tone gentle, as if she were just chatting with an ordinary child. "Nami," the little girl replied crisply, her voice sweet as candy, "inviting you to be close." Blinking her large, watery eyes, she curiously examined the strangers before her, without a trace of awkwardness. Chapter 383 Meal. "You're so beautiful," Natasha said with a warm smile, sincerely praising the little girl before her. "You're beautiful too," replied Seraph Nami, her lips curling up in a sweet smile. She then warmly ushered Steve, Natasha, Peter, and the Punisher into the hall. The scene inside was truly breathtaking, the decorations pleasing to the eye like something straight out of a fairy tale. The walls were made of giant lollipops, each piece pieced together. Illuminated by the lights, they shone with a dazzling riot of color, creating a dreamlike candy kingdom. The tables and chairs were meticulously crafted from gingerbread, their shapes unique and intricate, each detail showcasing ingenuity and craftsmanship, a breathtaking display of exquisite craftsmanship. However, this beautiful scene didn't relax the group, instead, it only made them feel more uneasy. They vigilantly observed every corner and every subtle movement, their bodies tense, ready for any possible emergency. Surprisingly, the interior of the candy house was incredibly spacious, comparable to a castle, a stark contrast to the seemingly small, huge room it appeared from the outside. Furthermore, everything inside was filled with a variety of food. Even the cups used for drinking water were meticulously crafted from chocolate, their lifelike appearance seemingly emitting a rich chocolate aroma, tantalizing everyone's taste buds. Seraph Nami led the four people to the dining room, where the table was already laden with a dazzling array of delicious treats. Juicy roasted chicken legs shone with an alluring luster, emitting bursts of fragrant aroma. A colorful fruit platter, each piece as fresh as if freshly picked from the orchard. And then there were the exquisite cakes, layers of cream perfectly balanced against the soft base, topped with cherries that sparkled like rubies. Peter, gazing at the table overflowing with delicious food, swallowed uncontrollably, his stomach growling once again. "Please sit down." Seraph Nami gracefully took the lead, then said, "One last dish." Steve frowned, as if about to say something, but before he could open his mouth, Natasha quickly stopped him. Natasha gently shook her head at him, signaling him not to act rashly. Steve understood and reluctantly found a seat. The three men exchanged glances and followed suit. Just then, a gurgling sound was heard, the sound of a food cart rolling. Then, Seraph Sanji made a dazzling appearance, pushing the food cart. He was neatly dressed in chef's attire, his face brimming with confidence. "The dishes are here, everyone, enjoy," Seraph Sanji greeted enthusiastically, his tone full of pride in his culinary skills. Seraph Nami picked up her knife and fork and elegantly savored the meal, praising it as she ate. "Delicious. Sanji, your cooking has improved again, of course. I aspire to be the best chef you can be." A smug smile lit up Sanji's face, but when he turned his gaze to Steve and the others, he saw them sitting there motionless. His expression darkened, and he demanded, "Why aren't you eating? Are you questioning my cooking?" Steve and the other three were naturally wary. They couldn't easily eat anything in such a strange place. After all, they had to be extremely cautious. "They're worried you might have poisoned it," Nami explained softly, putting down her knife and fork. "Asshole. Who do you think I am?" Upon hearing this, Sanji flew into a rage, his face flushing red, and veins popping out of his forehead. Seeing this, the Punisher unhesitatingly drew his gun, attempting to intimidate them. But to everyone's astonishment, the next second, the once sturdy gun transformed into a breadstick, dangling limply from his hand. "What the fuck?" The Punisher's eyes widened in disbelief. He angrily threw the breadstick away and quickly pulled another gun from his waistband, his eyes filled with vigilance and anger. "How dare you draw a weapon while we're eating? I'll kill you." Seraph Sanji was completely enraged. As he spoke, he made a move to attack, his aura soaring, as if the air around them had become incandescent. Steve and the other three immediately prepared for battle. They stood up and adopted defensive stances, their eyes fixed on each other, not daring to slack off. "Can't you just eat in peace?" At this tense moment, Seraph Nami suddenly unleashed a powerful aura of domineering power. The invisible force, like a surging wave, instantly swept towards Steve and the other three. Steve and the other three felt as if they had been struck by a club. Their heads instantly felt dizzy, their thoughts slowed, and their bodies began to stagger. Psychic attack. Steve, startled, instantly understood. He felt even more wary of the seemingly harmless little girl. Everyone else, therefore, became even more cautious, not daring to let their guard down. Don't worry, Sanji wouldn't poison the food. Seraph Nami looked at Steve and the others, her tone tinged with undeniable certainty. HMPH, Seraph Sanji snorted, still furious, muttering, I wouldn't cook for you if it weren't for the adults' orders. Where's Weiss? Steve grasped the key point and asked anxiously. After all, the purpose of their trip was to find Weiss. Now that they had finally heard news about Weiss, he was naturally eager to learn the details. Who knows? Seraph Nami replied calmly, seemingly unconcerned, before returning to her meal, paying no attention to Steve. This left Steve furious and anxious, yet helpless. Natasha took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Her gaze scanned the food on the table, finally settling on the juicy, tender steak in front of her. She slowly reached out and picked up her knife and fork. The soft clink of metal against cutlery was particularly clear in the tense atmosphere. She began to carve into the steak, each movement cautious. As the first piece entered her mouth, Natasha's eyes widened slightly, a hint of surprise crossing her face. The flavor of the steak spread across her tongue. The tender meat, the perfect cooking time, and the unique seasoning made her involuntarily immerse herself in the exquisite taste. She chewed a few times, swallowed, and looked at Steve and the others, nodding slightly, indicating that the food was fine. Peter sat aside, his eyes fixed on Natasha's every move, his heart filled with hesitation and doubt. His throat rolled, and he swallowed, his hands rubbing nervously on his legs. After seeing Natasha's gesture, he gritted his teeth, half believingly reached out, picked up the knife and fork, cut off a small piece of steak, and carefully put it into his mouth. The moment the taste of the steak spread in his mouth, his eyes instantly lit up, and he couldn't help but exclaimed, "Delicious." Chapter 384 Game. Halfway through the meal, the atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to ease slightly, buoyed by the delicious food, but beneath the surface, a dark undercurrent swirled. Natasha, ever the most meticulous, knew she couldn't miss any opportunity to gain intelligence, so she quietly set about extracting it. With a seemingly casual smile on her face, she skillfully peppered the air with seemingly casual questions, attempting to elicit useful information from Seraphim Nami. To everyone's surprise, Seraphim Nami concealed nothing, answering every question and revealing everything they needed to know. But the more frank her responses became, the more uneasy Natasha and Steve grew, a sense of foreboding spreading within them. They knew this meant the enemy simply didn't take them seriously, as if they were ants, insignificant, unable to stir up any trouble. The root cause was the sheer disparity in power between the two sides. This harsh reality weighed like a heavy rock, weighing them down, leaving them breathless. The four people seated at the table exchanged glances as they listened to Seraph Nami's response. They were all pondering the same question: should they seize this moment, unexpectedly resort to force, and subdue the two seraphs? However, Seraph Nami and Seraph Usopp, seemingly oblivious to their thoughts, continued to enjoy their food. They were voracious eaters, moving swiftly yet gracefully. In a matter of moments, the table's dazzling array of delicacies had been devoured. After finishing her meal, Seraph Nami elegantly took her napkin and gently wiped her lips, her gesture as graceful and composed as if she were attending a high-end dinner. Then, she sat up slightly and clapped her hands. With a faint flicker of light, a projection slowly appeared in the air. Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to the projection, which showed Seraph Usopp battling Tony and Hawkeye. The battle unfolded fiercely, yet it was one-sided. It was clear that Tony and Hawkeye were being pinned down by Seraph Usopp, barely able to evade, making it impossible for them to mount an effective counterattack. The Iron Legion's once mighty armored formations were now reduced to a handful, their battered state seemingly poised for collapse. "Guess how long they can hold out?" Seraph Nami asked leisurely, her chin resting on her right hand, her head tilted, a hint of amusement in her eyes. As soon as these words left her mouth, the Punisher could no longer contain his rage. He leaped to his feet, his eyes wide with rage, and with a powerful thrust of both hands, he flipped the table to the ground with a resounding clang. Without a word, he whipped a submachine gun from his waistband, pointed it at Seraph Nami and Seraph Usopp, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Da 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 da, a barrage of bullets whizzed towards each other. However, a strange scene occurred. Just as the bullets were about to reach the two men, they suddenly transformed into brightly colored candies. Crackle, they fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Peter's eyes widened at the sight, his face filled with disbelief. He was anxious and wanted to help. But before he could move, the chair he was sitting on suddenly came alive, instantly growing handcuffs and leg irons that trapped him tightly. The handcuffs and leg irons looked quite fragile, as if they could be broken off with just a little effort. But to Peter's despair, despite his extraordinary strength, no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free, and he could only be trapped there, anxiously waiting. Calm down, just as the Punisher, still consumed by rage and ready to launch another reckless attack, suddenly felt as if a pair of gentle hands were gently massaging his soul. The rage that had once raged like a blaze of fire quickly dissipated, as if doused with cold water, and his composure gradually returned. "What did you do?" Natasha's hair stood on end, a strong sense of crisis welling up within her. The Punisher was not a man of easy temper. For him to calm down so quickly could only be a supernatural power. And it was a supernatural power that could affect the mind, attacking intangible objects and leaving them defenseless. Perhaps they had been caught in its trap, unknowingly, from the moment they entered the candy house. Natasha couldn't help but recall how they had been led by the seemingly innocent little girl, each step a step like falling into a carefully crafted trap. Now, they were like being caught in an invisible net, unable to escape. "You're so weak. I don't know why the Lord told us to be careful." Nami strode lightly towards Natasha, bending slightly. She reached out her slender finger and lifted Natasha's chin, her eyes filled with disdain and amusement. "I really want to dig into your heart and see if there's anything special about you." Her lips parted, but the words she uttered were like the whispers of a demon, tinged with a chilling eeriness. Her previous innocent and lovely demeanor was completely gone. She was now a sinister little devil, the fierceness hidden beneath her sweet exterior fully revealed. "But I have a better idea." With these words, she shuffled lightly to the Punisher's side, slowly reaching out and placing a hand on his head. Instantly, an invisible force seemed to flow from her palm into the Punisher's body, and beads of sweat immediately formed on his forehead. The sweat trickled down his cheeks, soaking his clothes. His features began to contort, becoming hideous and ferocious. He gritted his teeth, groaning in agony as if enduring immense torture, his body trembling uncontrollably. However, seconds later, the Punisher seemed a completely different person. The pain faded from his face, his features regained composure, his eyes became hollow and dull, and his former defiant aura vanished without a trace. He stood respectfully behind Nami, his body erect, like a loyal servant, completely obeying her commands. The sight was chilling. "Game on." Nami's face lit up with an excited smile. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Internal Strife. Upon hearing the cold command, the Punisher's eyes glazed over as he mechanically walked toward the door, his steps heavy yet filled with an irresistible persistence. Steve, observing this, felt a strong sense of foreboding. He knew the Punisher had lost all consciousness and was in dire straits. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, attempting to stop the Punisher. Bang! Just as Steve was about to touch the Punisher fired without warning. Fortunately, Steve reacted quickly, raising his shield to block the sudden attack. The Punisher, seemingly undeterred, continued toward the door and quickly exited the candy shack. Outside, the long-awaited superheroes, seeing someone emerge, assumed that Steve and his team had successfully completed their mission. They eagerly rushed over, their faces filled with concern and anticipation. But they never expected to be met with the merciless muzzle of the Punisher's gun. Bang! Bang! Two muffled gunshots echoed. Caught off guard, the superheroes didn't even have time to react before clutching their chests and collapsing in a pool of blood. The crimson blood slowly spread across the ground, a horrific sight. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" the other superheroes cried out in shock and anger. They had never imagined their former comrades would suddenly murder one of their own. Without hesitation, they drew their weapons and began fighting back. For a moment, the sounds of shouting and fighting merged, and the scene descended into chaos. What a show! Inside the candy shop, Nami watched the chaotic scene outside, her face beaming with excitement as she clapped joyfully, as if enjoying a spectacular performance, oblivious to the lives already lost. You really have a bad taste, Seraph Sanji couldn't help but scoff. Meanwhile, Natasha seized the opportunity and slid towards Seraphim Nami. Her movement was clean and decisive, landing a powerful kick on Nami's calf. But to her despair, the kick felt like hitting an impenetrable iron pillar. The immense recoil sent a sharp pain through her foot, nearly knocking her off her feet. HMPH, Seraphim Nami snorted, a flicker of anger in her eyes. She suddenly raised her foot and kicked Natasha hard. Like a weightless football, Natasha was sent flying, slamming directly into the wall. The candy on the wall had a strong stickiness, instantly clinging to Natasha. She struggled desperately, but couldn't get free, trapped helplessly. Peter was in no better condition, still bound to the strange chair, unable to move. Now, only Captain America, Steve, was still free. Your shield is quite good. Seraph Nami studied the shield in Steve's hand, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Steve ignored her, standing in front of Natasha with a serious expression, watching her vigilantly, ready to respond to any attack. Don't worry, I won't do anything else, Seraph Nami said nonchalantly, sitting in a chair with her legs crossed, as if she were bored. What exactly is your purpose? Steve demanded loudly, his eyes wide open. Seraph Nami leisurely played with her hair, saying in a gentle voice, it's nothing, just boredom. The adults didn't set any obstacles. We were just curious about the abilities of this world's superheroes, so we added some levels to see what you could do. She spread her hands, looking nonchalant, and continued, I didn't expect you were so weak that you couldn't even make it past the second level. Sanji, you can contact them. The game is over, bored. Steve's face darkened, and he said seriously, just for fun? Do you know how much harm your actions have caused? How many people have died? Who knows? The two seraphs maintained their unconcerned attitude, their disregard for life evident, as if the dead were nothing more than ants, not worth mentioning. This disregard for life completely infuriated Steve, and he hurled his shield at the two men. The shield drew a silver arc through the air, flying towards them with fierce momentum. Seraph Sanji, however, remained calm. He simply extended his hand slightly and single-handedly caught the rapidly approaching shield. Steve, seeing this, quickly activated the shield's magnetic force, attempting to retract it, but it remained motionless, as if Sanji had firmly grasped it. The material of the shield is indeed unique. Perhaps the doctor would be interested. Seraph Sanji observed the shield in his hand, a glint of greed in his eyes. Seeing the shield seized, Steve, without hesitation, quickly pulled a smoke bomb from his belt and flung it to the ground. With a bang, the smoke instantly spread, shrouding the surroundings in a blanket of white, and sharply reducing visibility. Seizing this opportunity, Steve drew a sharp dagger, swiftly ran to the wall, and with a powerful force, cut the candy sticking to Natasha. He then turned and helped Peter untie the chair. Supporting each other, the three of them rushed towards the candy shop's entrance, using the cover of the smoke. As they rushed out, the superheroes still fighting outside saw the three of them. Due to the Punisher's sudden betrayal, they were now wary and, believing them to be under control, attacked without a word. Hey, be careful. Are you trying to kill me? Peter, quick-witted and swift-handed, narrowly dodged a punch from Jessica Jones. He shouted as he dodged, his face filled with helplessness and anxiety. Who knows if you're under control? Jessica Jones shouted back, her attack showing no sign of stopping. Her eyes were filled with wariness and distrust. Each punch and kick landed with unwavering force, stirring the air around them. They finally subdued the Punisher. Stop. We won't resist. Steve was distraught. He knew such internal conflict would only make the situation worse. Without hesitation, he raised his hands and shouted, trying to calm everyone down and stop the pointless fighting. His voice was resounding in the chaotic battlefield, carrying an undeniable sincerity, hoping his companions would listen. We're not being controlled. We have two enemies right now, Steve continued to explain eagerly, the veins on his forehead bulging slightly with anxiety. He dodged his companions' attacks while striving to make his voice clearly reach everyone, so that they could understand the true situation. It's those two seraphim from the candy house who are causing this. They've controlled the Punisher and set numerous traps for us. Everyone, stop and go deal with the real enemy together. Chapter 386 Opportunity. Steve's cry calmed the superheroes. Are you really not being controlled? Matt Murdock frowned, a look of caution on his face. He narrowed his blind yet all-seeing eyes, carefully sensing the surrounding atmosphere. He cast a searching glance at Steve and the others, trying to gauge their veracity from their expressions and subtle reactions. I'm sure, Steve's eyes were clear, his tone firm and sincere. He stood straight, unwavering, his sincerity silently proving his words were the truth. Matt Murdock activated his heightened perception, trying to detect signs of deception. However, he knew that those controlled often didn't even realize they were being controlled. He was still torn between two minds, unsure whether to trust Steve and the others. Just as everyone was caught in this dilemma, a white figure darted out of the candy house like a ghost, swiftly and without pause. Crack, with a few chilling, crisp sounds, the superheroes barely even saw their opponents' movements before their heads were mercilessly twisted off. Warm blood gushed out like a fountain, spilling onto the ground. "You're talking too much nonsense." Seraph Nami appeared, now sporting a pair of small, eerie horns and a long, thin tail that swayed gently behind her, a true fusion of angel and demon. Her once sweet features now took on a sinister, terrifying quality, a chilling feeling. "Bixx!" A superhero roared in anger, and before Seraph Nami could regain her balance, he launched a fierce attack from behind, using all his strength to strike, attempting to catch her off guard. However, Nami's tail swiftly spun like a venomous snake, lashing out at the attacker in an instant. With a sizzling sound, it pierced its attacker's chest. Blood dripped from its tail, splattering onto the ground in a horrifying display. Nami impassively retracted her tail, licking the bloodstains with her tongue as if savoring something delicious, her eyes filled with cruelty and amusement. "Demon," the superheroes finally reacted. Shocked and enraged, they watched the terrifying being before them, a being that looked like it had crawled from the depths of hell. They shouted, preparing for a desperate fight. Jessica Jones gritted her teeth, roared, and lifted a massive rock, 3 stories high, with both hands. With all her might, she hurled it towards the Seraph Nami, sending a whirring sound and a formidable momentum. "Flying finger gun," Seraph Nami whispered, her red lips softly opening. Then, with a flick of her finger, an invisible force erupted, shattering the rock hurtling towards her, sending countless fragments flying everywhere and raising a cloud of dust. Then, in a flash, she appeared before Jessica Jones. She raised her leg high, like an impenetrable whip, lashing out with a sharp, whistling sound. With a resounding bang, Jessica Jones had no time to dodge, and was blasted away like a cannonball, hurtling into the distance. Luke Cage, quick-witted, rushed forward to catch her, but the immense force was too overwhelming. The moment he caught her, he was flung backward dozens of meters, landing heavily on the ground in a cloud of dust. Seraph Nami stood still, using her observation haki to sense the two men's life force. A hint of confusion crossed her face, and she muttered to herself, "Still alive? I was going to kick you into the time." Wow! Jessica Jones struggled to her feet, spitting out a mouthful of blood mixed with fragments of internal organs, demonstrating the severity of the injury. Fortunately, her body had already begun to repair the damage, and the damaged organs were slowly healing at a visible speed. Bixx, at %, Jessica Jones, a Hell's Kitchen resident and known for her straightforward and aggressive personality, was now furious, her tongue lashing out at Seraph Nami. Upon hearing these obscene words, Seraph Nami's face darkened, her eyes filled with rage. She lashed out, "I'm going to rip your mouth out." With that, she transformed into a white shadow and charged at Jessica Jones once again. She crushed any superheroes who tried to stop her, sending their bodies flying like broken dolls. Chaos erupted, and screams filled the air. "Stop!" Steve, distraught, rushed forward to stop her, but his movements were too slow. And now, without his shield, he felt powerless, unable to mount any effective resistance. He could only watch helplessly as Seraph Nami charged towards Jessica Jones, distraught but helpless. Swish, swish, Peter, beside her, frantically shot out Spider Silk, attempting to entangle Seraph Nami and stop her. But Nami was too fast and agile, easily dodging the Spider Silk, offering no resistance at all. "Die!" Seraph Nami roared, her needle-sharp tail piercing with murderous intent as it stabbed towards Jessica Jones, swift as lightning piercing the night sky. In the blink of an eye, blood flowed down the tail, slowly dripping onto the ground in a glaring pool. However, surprisingly, the injured person wasn't Jessica Jones, but Luke Cage. In that critical moment, Luke Cage lunged forward, shielding Jessica Jones with his arms. The sharp tip of the tail mercilessly pierced his arms, sending blood gushing out, staining his clothes red and trickling down his arms. At this moment, The tip of the tail was only a few centimeters away from his eyes. The cold touch was like the scythe of the god of death, which could take his life at any time, but Luke Cage did not retreat. His eyes were full of determination and perseverance, staring at the Seraph Nami in front of him. Chapter 387 Desperate Situation. Got you. Luke Cage fought back the excruciating pain in his arms, veins bulging on his forehead and beads of sweat streaming down his cheeks. He exerted all his strength, gripping Seraph Nami's tail with both hands. Attack! Luke Cage shouted at the top of his lungs. Hearing this cry, the other superheroes rushed over from all directions, their eyes burning with rage, their fear forgotten, their single-minded desire to defeat the ruthless and bloodthirsty Seraph Nami. Some leaped high, brandishing their weapons and slashing at Nami. Others rapidly gathered energy, preparing to unleash powerful moves to deliver a fatal blow. Still others rapidly unleashed a variety of hidden weapons. Suddenly, countless attacks rained down on Seraph Nami. However, their all-out attacks were merely tickling, causing no real damage to her. Furthermore, this seemingly futile attack only utterly enraged her. A dense, dark aura surged from her body. Black and red lightning entwined around her fist like serpents, crackling and flickering as if venting her impending rage, filling the air around them with a suffocating, menacing air. Cold sweat dripped from Luke Cage's forehead. He clenched his teeth, his face, pale with pain, filled with solemnity and fear. He had a strong premonition that if he were struck by this terrifying force, he would be doomed. And the result was just as brutal as he had anticipated. Seraph Nami's seemingly small fist, with immense force, slammed into Luke Cage's broad chest. With a resounding bang, the immense force instantly pierced his chest like a surging tide, the impact spreading wildly in all directions from the point of impact. The whistling wind of the fist blew Jessica Jones away, her body arcing through the air before landing heavily on the ground not far away. Not only Jessica Jones, but everything in the fan-shaped area behind Luke Cage, rocks, trees, and other debris, was mercilessly blown away by the powerful force of the fist, as if struck by a hurricane. Even the ground seemed to have been slashed by a sharp blade, several layers of it being shaved away. Amidst the flying dust, a vast, hideous crater was revealed. The devastating scene was horrifying. Luke Cage feebly loosened his grip on Nami's tail and, like a puppet without support, slowly fell to his knees. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, dripping down his chin and pooling on the ground. His vision grew blurry, and his body grew cold, as if the life itself was being drained from him bit by bit. Jessica, Jessica, he murmured, his beloved's name weakly and reluctance-filled, each word seeming to exhaust all his strength. He struggled to turn his head, to look at his beloved once more, his eyes filled with longing and concern. Even at the brink of death, Jessica Jones remained the one he held most dear. Then, with a resounding bang, a scene of utter cruelty unfolded. Seraph Nami's whip-like tail lashed out with incredible speed, instantly exploding Luke Cage's head like a fragile watermelon. Blood and brain matter splattered everywhere, spraying the surrounding ground. The horrific sight was terrifying, and his stomach churned. "Who allowed you to touch me with your filthy hands?" Seraph Nami's face was savage, her eyes etched with undisguised cruelty and coldness, her demonic side fully exposed, as if she had just taken not a life but a mere insect. Jessica Jones watched helplessly as her lover perished before her eyes. Her eyes widened in disbelief and endless agony, as if she had lost all reason. She roared in fury, attacking Seraph Nami with a desperate determination. Each punch and kick was filled with desperation, yet her attacks were utterly haphazard, lashing out in sheer rage. Boring, Seraph Nami sneered at Jessica Jones's frantic attacks, dodging them with swift movements. The seemingly ferocious blows barely touched her. In her eyes, Jessica Jones's fighting skills were riddled with flaws, childish and ridiculous, posing no threat at all. "Jones, calm down," Steve screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice frantic. He knew Jessica Jones's frantic attack wouldn't harm her foe, but would only put him in greater danger. "You have no chance of winning alone," but Jessica Jones, consumed by grief and rage, couldn't listen. She lunged recklessly at Seraph Nami, eyes filled with hatred, as if determined to perish alongside her. Swoosh! At that moment, Seraph Nami's tail slashed across Jessica Jones's neck like a flash of black lightning, swiftly leaving no time for reaction. A deep bloody mark instantly appeared on her neck, and blood began to seep out. At first, it was only a trickle, but soon, it intensified, like a bursting dam, soaking the ground beneath his feet, forming a horrifying pool of blood. "Spider-Man!" distraught, rushed to her side, attempting to provide her with emergency medical care using his knowledge. After all, Jessica Jones possessed a formidable physique and exceptional resilience, perhaps offering a glimmer of hope. But before he could act, a terrifying scene unfolded. Jessica Jones's head slowly fell away, her eyes fixed on Spider-Man, the lingering anger, resentment, and despair clearly visible. The scene was so horrifying that Spider-Man froze in place, his mind blank. He had no idea how to react, and simply stared blankly at the horrific scene before him, his heart filled with endless sadness and despair. Chapter 388 Interruption. "You're next, little spider." Seraph Nami's sweet voice now sounded like a curse from hell. She raised her chin slightly, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. She licked her lips, like a beast about to stalk its prey, savoring the thrill of the hunt. Peter felt a chill run down his spine. His spider sense frantically warned him, the sharp stinging sensation ringing countless alarm bells in his mind, signaling the approaching mortal danger. Peter instinctively lowered his head, and in that instant, he saw a dark figure flash past. Its tail slashed through the air, and the sharp wind whistled like a deathly cry, sending his heart racing. Precognitive ability? Too bad you're so slow, Seraph Nami snorted coldly. Her figure swiftly approached Peter like a ghost, and with a sharp knee strike, it slammed into his abdomen. Peter felt a tremendous force, and he was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. At that moment, Danny Rand seized his moment. He took a deep breath, channeling his inner energy into his fist. A faint glow emanated from it. Taking advantage of the brief pause after Seraph Nami's attack on Peter, he lunged forward, successfully striking Seraph Nami in the face. However, to his shock, Seraph Nami stood motionless, as if his full-strength blow had been but a breeze. "Your fist is too weak." Seraph Nami's lips curled up in a slight, dismissive smile. Her hand shot out like lightning, grasping Danny Rand's wrist tightly, and then twisted it with a sudden force. With a crisp snap, Danny Rand's wrist was broken, exposing the bone to the air. Blood gushed out instantly, and he screamed in agony, his face turning as pale as paper. "I heard your nickname is Iron Fist." Seraph Nami curled her lips in disdain, her eyes filled with mockery. "Compared to that other Iron Fist, you're nothing." The battle was hopelessly one-sided. In just a few minutes, most of the superheroes were dead or wounded. Broken limbs and shattered weapons littered the battlefield, and blood stained the ground a glaring red. Most of the remaining warriors had lost confidence, their eyes filled with fear and confusion. The enemy's strength far exceeded their imagination, like an insurmountable chasm that stood between them, leaving them with no hope of victory. "Sweep the legs." Seraph Nami leaped high, her legs dancing through the air in a swift, trailing after images. Her violent slashing blows, like razor-sharp blades, enveloped the superheroes. Several superheroes, unable to dodge, were instantly split in two by the fierce blows, their bodies falling like shattered dolls, the flames of life ruthlessly extinguished in that moment. Those who managed to survive were also battered and wounded. Their armor was shattered, their bodies covered in blood and wounds. Some were even unable to stand, but they still stubbornly grasped their weapons, their eyes gleaming with a glimmer of unyielding determination. But this unyielding spirit seemed so insignificant and powerless in the face of the powerful enemy. Too weak, Seraph Nami slowly condensed a ball of black flame in her hand. The flame leaped, emitting a chilling aura, as if it would devour everything around it. "This strike will wipe you all out." Her voice was cold and resolute, like a decree from the god of death. However, just as she was about to attack, she suddenly stopped. "Yes, I obey your orders, sir." Seraph Nami's gaze fell on Steve, a subtle hint of strangeness flashing in her eyes. "What good fortune. Your Excellency wishes to see you. I also have much to discuss with Weiss." Steve's face was gloomy. He clenched his fists, his nails digging deep into his palms, his heart filled with anger and helplessness. He instructed Natasha to stay and care for the injured, his eyes gleaming with determination and concern. In this dark hour, he remained a pillar of support. But Natasha and Peter couldn't bear to see Steve go alone to see Wes. They exchanged glances, their eyes filled with worry and determination. "We have no choice," they said, and followed the two seraphim into the candy house. However, upon entering, the scene suddenly shifted, and they were transported to another place. A towering tower rose before them, emanating an ancient and mysterious aura. Beyond the tower stretched a vast medicinal herb field, where colorful herbs swayed gently in the breeze, emitting waves of enchanting fragrance. A group of elves busily tended the herb field. Their small figures and nimble movements resembled a dancing flock of spirits, bringing a vibrant and dynamic energy to this mysterious land. These little creatures are from the Tontata tribe. Aren't they adorable? Seraph Nami seemed transformed. She knelt down, gently picked up a Tontata, a gentle smile on her face, and fed it a candy. She looked like an ordinary little girl enjoying her pet, completely devoid of the brutality and coldness she had just displayed on the battlefield. Let's go, Seraph Sanji, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, led the way with a seemingly casual yet uniquely rhythmic stride. Following his footsteps, they soon arrived at the tower's entrance. Just then, they encountered Seraph Usopp. Usopp was carrying a figure on his shoulders, the severely wounded Tony. Tony's face was as pale as paper, his lips bloodless. His armor was battered and tattered, with wisps of smoke rising from various parts, clearly having endured a brutal battle. Seraph Usopp also bore minor scratches, his clothes slightly torn, and a few strands of hair tangled across his forehead. It seems your opponent is quite interesting. Seraph Nami crossed her arms, staring at Tony with interest, her eyes glittering with curiosity. Not bad, his armor is quite interesting, the doctor is quite interested. Seraph Usopp shrugged slightly, a smug smile on his face. I see. Nami nodded gently, and was about to say something else. At that moment, the entrance to the tower slowly opened, and a bright light shone from within. Seraph Hawkeye walked out with a steady step, his eyes as sharp as an eagle. When his eyes fell on the unconscious Tony, his brows furrowed slightly. This won't do, he muttered, then quickly pulled a bottle of potion from his pocket and poured it into Tony's mouth with skillful and agile movements. Chapter 389 Final Meeting. Cough, cough. The unconscious Tony coughed violently, his body trembling slightly. His throat felt like it was on fire, a burning pain. With each cough, he slowly opened his eyes, the confusion and exhaustion he'd felt before he fell unconscious still lingering in them. You're awake. Seraph Usopp flung Tony to the ground mercilessly, as if he were a worthless object. Tony landed hard on the cold, hard ground, a muffled groan from the pain. This moment also brought him back to full consciousness, and he began to quickly assess his surroundings. Where is this? Tony's face was confused at first, his mind reeling from the fierce battle before his capture, and he groaned inwardly. He immediately tried to contact Jarvis, but received no response. This gave him a sense of foreboding, as if he were trapped and helpless. Are you okay? Steve saw this and hurried over to help Tony to his feet, his eyes filled with concern and worry. He studied Tony closely, as if searching for any signs of more serious injury. What happened? Steve's expression was forlorn, his voice dripping with a hint of weakness and despair. They were once superheroes fighting to protect the world, but now they had fallen into this state, filling him with frustration. Tony, perhaps guessing something, pursed his lips, remained silent, his gaze growing more serious. Don't dawdle. The Lord wants to see you. Seraph Hawkeye turned, expressionlessly walking forward, motioning for them to follow. Tony and Steve exchanged a glance, both understanding that they were now in a desperate position. They were at the mercy of others, seemingly left with no choice but to do as they were told. However, even in this predicament, they refused to give up, quietly gathering intelligence around them. Along the way, they had already encountered at least 4 seraphs. Tony carefully observed their every move as they walked, trying to discern any clues from their behavior. There was no apparent relationship between them, leading Tony to infer that their strength was similar. These seraphs shared the same distinctive features, the same skin color, wings, and hair color, with a mysterious flame burning behind their heads. This all made Tony believe they were a mysterious race. What puzzled him most was that they all looked like children, a stark contrast to their apparent strength. Tony silently sorted this information out, gradually forming a rough conclusion, though he knew it needed more evidence to support it. Along the way, they encountered several other seraphs. Tony pondered, sure enough, these children aren't natural creations, but artificial. A normal race would have both young and old, yet these seraphs all looked like children, and their vast combat experience defied common sense. Their weapons, man-made weapons, Tony thought with increasing conviction, his inference becoming increasingly correct. These seraphs were likely manufactured weapons of war. As Tony pondered this, Dada, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly interrupted his thoughts. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw an old man, disheveled hair and a fanatical gaze, rushing over breathlessly. So is the developer of the black armor, Vegapunk shouted, his voice trembling slightly with excitement, his eyes fixed intently on Tony and Steve. Doctor, upon seeing Vegapunk, the Seraphim immediately bowed respectfully, their manner reverent. Second only to Weiss in the Seraphim's affections. Vegapunk held a position of immense influence. You're all good kids, Vegapunk said with a casual wave, then fixed his gaze on Tony. Perhaps it was the unique aura that scientists draw to one another. Simply from looking at Tony's armor, Vegapunk recognized him as a brilliant scientist. What a remarkable scientist to be able to create a suit like that. Vegapunk's eyes gleamed with excitement and admiration, as if he had found a kindred spirit. Tony stared at the strange old man, wondering to himself, is this the doctor the Seraph mentioned? However, he also knew now wasn't the time to dwell on that. The most urgent task was to understand where he was and what these people were up to. Seraph Sanji stepped forward, stopping the agitated Vegapunk and whispering, the doctor is still waiting to see them. Is that so? Vegapunk's face tinged with regret. He longed to have a deeper conversation with Tony right away. From Tony's armor, he could discern Tony's profound scientific expertise, perhaps even surpassing him in some areas. He was eager to share his findings with Tony and explore the mysteries of science. However, Tony seemed to be Wes's enemy, which left him feeling frustrated. Don't worry. Wes didn't order the Seraphs to kill you, and he won't now. After you meet Wes, I'll show you around my research facility, Vegapunk said, looking at Tony with genuine comfort. There was a hint of kindness in his eyes, and Tony felt his goodwill. Tony could see that this was a pure scientist, driven only by a love for science and a pursuit of it, devoid of any ill will. So, Tony nodded and said, I'll definitely do it if I get a chance. Despite his words, Tony knew deep down that things might not be that simple. Unimpeded, Tony and Steve followed the Seraphim, slowly ascending the Mage Tower's winding staircase. The surrounding walls were engraved with mysterious runes, occasionally gleaming with faint light. Finally, they reached the tower's top floor. With a muffled creak, the heavy door slowly opened. Seraphim Hawkeye, expressionlessly, pushed the two inside. Then, the door slowly closed again, its heavy slamming sound echoing in the silent space, as if completely isolating them from the outside world, leaving only them and the figure seated in the chair. Wes sat quietly in the chair, his head resting lazily on his right hand, his eyes shone with an unfathomable depth. He was wearing a black robe with some strange patterns embroidered on it with gold thread. The robe emitted a faint glow, making him look even more mysterious in this slightly dim top-floor space. Chapter 390 Leading Astray. Long time no see, Wes was the first to break the silence. His voice was deep and magnetic, as if every word carried an invisible magic. It slowly echoed across the somewhat empty top floor of the Mage Tower, filling the entire space with a mysterious and solemn atmosphere. Tony narrowed his eyes slightly, staring intently at Wes, his sharp gaze trying to read something from Wes's deep, pond-like expression, even the slightest hint of emotion. But Wes's face remained as calm as a still lake, leaving him with nothing, which only heightened Tony's vigilance. Why? Steve could no longer contain his fury. He clenched his fists, the veins bulging from the force speaking of his current rage and resentment. His voice trembled slightly with emotion. Why did you kill so many people? Why? Wes, as if hearing an insignificant question, spoke calmly, his eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of confusion in his eyes. Why kill so many people? Steve gritted his teeth, repeating his question word by word, his eyes fixed on Wes, as if he were searching for an answer he could accept. They started it. Wes spread his hands, his expression still impassive, as if narrating a matter of course. The war has already begun. You're taking on the entire United States alone. Tony's eyes widened in disbelief, his voice rising, resounding louder in the enclosed space. You have no idea what you're facing, but Wes interrupted him calmly, raising his hand with a gentle wave, his tone filled with undeniable certainty. It's the U.S. government that doesn't know what they're facing. With this gesture, a vast and awe-inspiring image materialized, suspended in midair. It was the Big Bang. The entire image was filled with endless light and heat, as if it could shatter the constraints of time and space, directly presenting the vastness and chaos of the universe's birth. In that violent burst of energy, 6 gems shone with a strange light. Each emanated a unique aura, representing the 6 attributes of space, time, reality, power, mind, and soul. They seemed to be the 6 fundamental forces endowed by the universe, mysterious and powerful beyond imagination. Is that the cosmic cube? Tony and Steve exclaimed almost simultaneously. They immediately recognized the gem emitting a faint blue light, their eyes filled with shock. Previously, they only knew that the cosmic cube possessed incredible power, but they had never imagined that it was just one of these 6 mysterious gems, and that it had such a shocking origin. Its true name is the Space Stone. Wes nodded slightly, his gaze settling on the blue gem. A glint flickered in his eyes as he began to explain the origins of the Infinity Stones. Each one holds the most primal, purest power of the universe. Scattered across the cosmos, they've spent countless ages waiting to be discovered, or rather, to be mastered by the right people. Collecting all 6 Infinity Stones can grant any wish. Wes's voice remained low, but the words exploded like a bombshell in Tony and Steve's ears. Nonsense, Tony retorted immediately, his brow furrowed in disbelief and disdain. How could such a ridiculous thing be possible? It's not. In his world of science and rationality, such a statement was sheer fantasy, utterly contradicting every principle and logic he held dear. However, when he met Wes's eyes, he saw they were deadly serious, not a hint of joking. Tony's heart sank, his voice unconsciously lowering. Are you serious? Wes nodded, his eyes deepening. The one behind Loki and the Chitauri is Thanos, a cosmic overlord obsessed with collecting the Infinity Stones. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene instantly switched to Thanos leading his army to invade other civilizations. The cosmic army obscured the sky, densely packed with bizarre yet powerful warships and creatures. Wherever they went, planets were engulfed in flames and devastation. The destructive power displayed by the mighty cosmic army made Tony and Steve's expressions grow even more serious. They pursed their lips, filled with shock and worry. Planet after planet was rapidly conquered by Thanos' army, and worlds once teeming with life were instantly reduced to ruin. Even more astonishing was the fact that after each conquest, Thanos would wipe out half the population. Watching countless lives vanish in despair, dissolving into tiny specks of light scattered across the universe, Tony and Steve felt a chill run deep in their hearts. They couldn't comprehend the reason for this, and their hearts were filled with anger and fear towards this so-called master of the universe. Is he crazy? Steve's eyes widened as he muttered to himself, his voice trembling with unbearable pain at the loss of life and anger at Thanos' cruelty. They simply couldn't comprehend what could possibly motivate someone to commit such a ruthless act. It was beyond their comprehension. It was like opening a door to a world of darkness and madness, revealing the utter cruelty of the universe. Steve knew the reason, but he glanced at the stunned faces of Tony and Steve and declined to explain. What does this have to do with Earth? Thor has taken the Space Stone back to Asgard, Tony asked, frowning. There's also a Time Stone on Earth. Shit, Tony couldn't help but curse under his breath, his expression darkening. The thought of Earth facing such a massive crisis weighed heavily on his heart, like a huge rock. That means Thanos will likely lead his army to attack Earth. Steve clenched his fists, his eyes glinting with an unprecedented gravity. It would be an unprecedented catastrophe. Earth would likely be reduced to ruins under Thanos' iron yoke. Countless lives would be lost, just like the planets they had just seen in the image. And they were unprepared, and even before that, they were completely unaware of any of this. Tony's mind flashed to the image of Earth invaded by a cosmic army. Cities crumbled under the bombardment, people screamed and fled in despair, the once vibrant blue planet reduced to utter devastation. The thought of that powerful cosmic army descending on Earth someday filled Tony with a sense of urgency, like an invisible clock ticking in his ears, his anxiety growing with each passing second. He longed to return immediately, to tell the other superheroes this dire news, and then to come together to discuss countermeasures. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, they would fight tooth and nail to protect Earth, their home. Chapter 391 Captives. What does this have to do with what you've done? Steve frowned, a hint of wariness and confusion in his eyes. He felt like Wes had misled him. He had originally come to confront Wes about his cruel actions, but now he was dragged into a cosmic crisis concerning the survival of the entire Earth. Something was amiss, a sense that Wes had a deeper agenda, one they hadn't yet grasped. No, I just wanted to share this news. Wes remained calm, his composure unpredictable, as if he were simply a messenger. But both Tony and Steve knew it couldn't be that simple. The man before them concealed too many secrets, and they couldn't tell the truth from his words. Tony and Steve exchanged glances, each seeing confusion and suspicion in the other's eyes. They didn't know what Wes meant. At that moment, a thought struck Tony, being so close to Wes, and seemingly alone around him, might offer a rare opportunity. With this thought in mind, Tony quietly stepped on his shoe, triggering a mechanism hidden in the sole. Instantly, countless nanobots surged out like a tide, moving and combining rapidly in the air. In the blink of an eye, they covered Tony's entire body, forming a metallic armor. The energy lines on the armor shimmered with a faint blue light, accumulating immense power. Full power, Tony silently commanded in his mind. The next moment, a dazzling beam of light converged from the palm of the armor and shot straight at Wes. The speed was so fast that it seemed to destroy everything in sight. However, Wes simply opened his hand calmly. This seemingly casual movement had a magical effect. The moment the powerful beam approached Wes, it seemed as if drawn by an invisible force, slowly gathered in his hand, finally forming a small ball of energy, quietly hovering above his palm. Tony's all-out attack, barely a splash, was so easily neutralized. This scene left Tony and Steve's eyes wide open, filled with shock and disbelief. Tony, Earth's materials have limited you. Even in the universe, you're incredibly intelligent. Wes looked at Tony with a flicker of admiration. He truly recognized Tony's wisdom and understood that if Tony's abilities were placed in the vastness of space, they would surely radiate even more brilliantly. However, Tony was currently trapped within the limitations of Earth's materials, unable to reach higher levels of technology. Wes had no intention of killing Tony and Steve. In his plan, they would play a vital role later. So, with a simple wave of his hand, a gentle yet irresistible force stripped Tony's armor from his body, and the nanobots scattered to the ground, losing their original form. Then, the door to the room slowly opened. Wes gestured for them to come in, saying calmly, "Feel free to wander around." Tony and Steve exchanged glances, completely confused as to what Wes was up to, their hearts filled with confusion and unease. "We haven't said anything yet," Steve was about to say something, but Wes, no longer bothered to listen, waved his hand, and a powerful force blasted through them. Without a second to resist, they were sent flying backwards, straight out the door. Then, the door slammed shut, trapping them outside. "What do we do now?" Steve stood up, dusted himself off, and looked at Tony with a bewildered expression. He was completely lost. Just as they were at a loss for what to do, Seraph Hawkeye approached. His face remained expressionless, and he bluntly ordered, "Follow me. The doctor wants to see you." Tony and Steve exchanged glances, and an idea suddenly occurred to them. Tony whispered, "Follow me. Get some information." Steve nodded slightly, and the two of them followed Seraph Hawkeye silently out of the mage tower. Along the way, they passed a tribe of black dwarfs. They saw the tall, dark-skinned black dwarfs bustling about. Some were forging strangely shaped weapons, and the sparks flew everywhere, creating a primitive and rugged atmosphere. Others sat in groups, seemingly discussing something. The faint sound of low conversation gave off a mysterious and dangerous atmosphere. Tony was intrigued, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. He had never seen such a strange alien race before, and he began to speculate about their habits and fighting styles. However, he knew now was not the time to delve into them, so he suppressed his curiosity for the moment and continued following Seraph Hawkeye. Heading west, through a lush forest, they were suddenly struck by the sight that befell Tony and Steve. Before them lay a futuristic city, constructed by Vegapunk. The spectacular scene seemed straight out of a sci-fi film. A myriad of high-tech devices filled the city, and a massive energy shield glowed faintly above, enveloping the entire city for protection. On the streets, intelligent robots moved in an orderly fashion, some cleaning, others transporting supplies. Their movements were efficient and precise, without a single mistake. In the sky, uniquely shaped aircraft streaked across the sky, leaving streaks of brilliant light and shadow. These were the city's modes of transportation, moving at a dizzying speed. Pacifists patrolled the city's corners, their towering metallic forms radiating a cold aura. Their red eyes flickered as they vigilantly scanned their surroundings, ready to react immediately should they detect any anomaly. At the heart of the city lay Vegapunk's research facility, a towering structure steeped in the clouds, its streamlined form gleaming with a unique metallic sheen. Compared to the barbaric tribes they had passed by, this place was a world apart, a stark contrast that made one marvel at the vast difference. "This is definitely not Earth. There's no such place on Earth," Tony declared firmly, his eyes filled with wonder and curiosity. As he surveyed his surroundings, he rapidly analyzed the city's technological principles, attempting to identify any that might be of use to him. "Yes, this is a world created by the Lord," Seraph Hawkeye explained simply, his tone tinged with reverence for Weiss. To these seraphs, Weiss was their god, almighty. Creating such a wondrous world seemed simple enough for them. Creating the world, Steve's eyes widened in disbelief. That's something only God can do. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Return. When Tony and Steve followed Seraph Hawkeye to the entrance of the Research Institute, Vegapunk had been waiting there for a long time, his face filled with anticipation. Standing before the technologically advanced doors, his eyes brimming with uncontrollable excitement, like a child about to discover a long-cherished toy. "You're finally here," Vegapunk exclaimed warmly upon seeing Tony, giving him a big hug. As the brainiac of the pirate world, he was often immersed in the profound world of scientific research, leaving few around him truly on the same page. Even the most accomplished researchers could barely keep up with his cutting-edge and profound research, let alone engage in in-depth discussions or mutual inspiration. However, the moment he laid eyes on Tony's black armor, Vegapunk keenly sensed that the creator of this suit must be a scientist no less capable than himself. This discovery filled him with ecstasy, as if he had finally found a partner in the vast ocean of scientific research. Weiss, fully aware of Vegapunk's obsession and dedication to scientific research, placed few restrictions on his research, essentially allowing him to pursue whatever he desired. However, for Vegapunk, even with such a relaxed research environment, having no one to discuss and delve into his research with was a profoundly painful experience. To free himself up to explore diverse areas of research, he harnessed his exceptional intellect and created 7 clones, each with unique abilities and tasks to assist him in his complex research. What a genius! Tony gazed at Vegapunk, his eyes filled with admiration, complimenting him. "This way, you'll have more time to research more areas." "Indeed, how did you solve this problem?" Vegapunk looked at Tony curiously, eager to learn how this scientist from another world, faced with the same dilemma, had come up with a unique solution. "Artificial intelligence," Tony replied with a smile. He knew the AI he had developed had played a significant role in scientific research and armor control, a feat he was particularly proud of. Artificial intelligence, Vegapunk frowned slightly. The concept was completely new to him, a field he had never explored before. His eyes instantly lit with a fierce thirst for knowledge, like an explorer searching for uncharted treasure, eager to delve deeper into its mysteries. Seeing this, Tony patiently began explaining everything, detailing everything from the fundamental principles of AI, to how it learns, how it assists him with complex calculations and decision-making, to its crucial role within the Warframe system. Vegapunk listened raptly, nodding and sometimes revealing a look of sudden enlightenment, his eyes growing brighter. "Amazing. This is like the birth of a new species," Vegapunk exclaimed. As a pure scientist, he only saw the scientific advancement represented by this technology. The potential implications were completely beyond his consideration. He was completely consumed by this new knowledge, lost in the contemplation of the unknown realms of scientific research. "Maybe I should implant new programs into all the pacifists," Vegapunk muttered to himself as if he had suddenly thought of something, his eyes showing an eagerness to try. Pacifist, Tony was immediately interested when he heard the word, and looked at Vegapunk with curiosity, his heart full of desire to explore this unfamiliar thing. Seeing Tony's interest, Vegapunk did not intend to hide anything and began to introduce the pacifists in detail. He talked about how the pacifists were created, how powerful their combat power and unique functions were. In the process of introduction, he also mentioned some basic conditions of the pirate world, such as the distribution of various forces in the vast ocean, the unique customs and habits of different islands, and the various deeds of those dreaded pirate groups and the headquarters of the Navy. Sure enough, these people are not from Earth. Tony listened, pondering to himself. Vegapunk's revelations only reinforced his conviction that he was in a completely unfamiliar world. He quietly inquired about various matters, and Vegapunk answered them without hesitation, seemingly unconcerned about whether his information would leak out. In his eyes, scientific research was paramount, and everything else seemed less crucial. "What an interesting planet," Tony exclaimed heartily. He was captivated by the pirate world Vegapunk described, especially the myriad magical devil fruits, which possessed incredible abilities and granted unimaginable power. And the powerful haki, all of it was a novelty. "Steve, listening beside him, was also fascinated. "It's just that there's going to be a great flood," Vegapunk sighed softly, a trace of regret on his face. "But the world Wes created can accommodate some people." As he spoke, he gazed into the distance, a complex expression of worry about the impending disaster, yet also grateful for the glimmer of hope. Suddenly, as if remembering something important, Vegapunk changed the subject, his gaze returning to Tony, his eyes filled with curiosity. "By the way, the material of the black armor is very unique. I've never seen it before." "It's unique to your planet, it's called vibranium," Tony replied. The mention of vibranium brought back memories of the hardships he'd endured to obtain this precious material, and a wave of emotion welled up in his heart. "What an amazing material," Vegapunk exclaimed, already imagining the amazing results it would yield if used in his own research. "It's just too expensive," Tony couldn't help but grumble, remembering the enormous sums he'd expended on crafting the black armor. Even with his wealth, it still felt painful, and this gave him a love-hate relationship with vibranium. Thus, Tony and Steve spent a few days at Vegapunk's lab, immersed in all sorts of new scientific knowledge and fascinating experiences every day. Their days were both fulfilling and filled with surprises. However, when he wanted to find out more information about Weiss, he found himself on the streets of Washington. Chapter 393 Follow-up. Returning to Washington, D.C., along with the remaining superheroes, they all wore exhausted expressions, their eyes filled with confusion and bewilderment, as if awakened from a long and bizarre nightmare. "What happened? What's going on?" they asked, each one asking, but after looking at each other, no one could comprehend what had happened. At that moment, as if receiving some kind of command, the snowstorm that had blanketed Washington began to dissipate. The ice that had blanketed the city also melted rapidly, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the streets, like a symphony of the city's thawing. The previously frozen residents gradually regained their vitality, and at first they looked around blankly, their eyes filled with confusion. They didn't even know what was happening to them. Their memories were stuck in the past, a few weeks ago, when Washington was a bustling and peaceful place. But now, the streets were a shattered mess, littered with shattered buildings and shattered walls. The stark contrast left them terrified and bewildered, leaving them standing there, bewildered. Even Tony, as intelligent as he was lost in thought. He simply couldn't fathom Wes's motives. The series of actions Wes had taken in Washington seemed grand, yet seemingly meaningless and unnecessary. But Tony knew this wasn't the time to dwell on that. The priority was to address the thorny issues at hand. After all, so many superheroes had sacrificed their lives in this sudden disaster, protecting the city and the world. Their affairs needed to be properly handled, a fundamental respect for heroes. The military responded swiftly, deploying a large number of soldiers into Washington, deploying defenses at key locations throughout the city to prevent further incidents. At the same time, explaining this incident to the international community posed a challenge. The implications of this incident were enormous. If mishandled, it could easily trigger international panic and chaos. Therefore, finding a way to minimize the impact was crucial. This complex series of issues weighed heavily on Tony's mind, requiring his attention and strategy. For the next month, the entire city of Washington was engulfed in a frenzy of reconstruction. Construction workers toiled day and night, and various construction vehicles rumbled through the streets, carrying materials. Finally, the White House was rebuilt, once again standing in the heart of Washington. Its solemn and majestic facade seemed to symbolize the city's resilience and unyielding spirit. A grand funeral was held to commemorate the fallen superheroes. On the day of the funeral, the sky was overcast, as if even the heavens were mourning for these heroes. The streets were lined with mourners, solemn expressions, tears in their eyes, flowers in their hands, silently bidding farewell to the heroes. The names of the heroes were engraved one by one on the towering monument, the golden inscriptions gleaming in the sunlight. This was the glory they wrote with their lives, a memory that will be remembered forever. As time passed, life gradually returned to normal, the city's pain seemed to heal, the streets regained their former bustle and prosperity, and people began to go about their daily lives. The heart-wrenching incident gradually faded into the depths of memory. However, one day, peaceful life was once again shattered. As we all know, school bullying is a thorny problem in every country. Like a shadow lurking beneath a supposedly pure and peaceful campus, it occasionally surfaces, bringing pain and distress to young people who should be growing up carefree. Teenagers are at a unique stage when they crave self-expression and attention. However, Some choose to use the wrong means of violence to demonstrate their so-called extraordinariness, building their own happiness on the suffering of others, which in turn breeds countless heartbreaking incidents of bullying. Scorpius Green was such a pitiful creature, like a frightened little rabbit, living in fear in a schoolyard that should have been filled with sunshine. His dazzling red hair, a hallmark of his uniqueness and attention, became the cause of his ostracism and bullying. His classmates constantly looked at him with strange eyes, pointed at him, and occasionally played pranks or even physically bullied him. This constant exposure to such an environment shaped his sensitive and humble character. At school, he constantly sought to conceal himself, walking with his head down and silently weaving through the crowds, hoping to become less noticeable, like a transparent person. Perhaps by remaining unnoticed, he could avoid being hurt. However, his red hair was too conspicuous. No matter how hard he tried to be discreet, it was like a flame in the darkness, a constant target for those with malicious intent. During break that day, Scorpius Green cautiously approached his locker as usual, preparing to grab a book for the next class. He had barely opened the locker, barely reaching inside when, with a resounding bang, the locker slammed shut, nearly pinching his hand. Startled, Green looked up in anger. But once he saw who had closed the locker, his simmering anger vanished, replaced by a deep sense of fear. Like a mouse caught by a cat, he lowered his head, not daring to meet the gaze of the person, his body trembling slightly. The man who had closed the locker was a black man, towering like a hill, exuding an intimidating aura. He was Carl, the school's notorious bully, who often exploited his physical strength to bully other students, satisfying his twisted vanity. Furthermore, rumors of his close ties to gangs outside the school intensified everyone's fear of him. Normally, everyone would avoid him, fearing the prospect of offending this scourge. And today, for some reason, the bully had set his sights on Green, seemingly intent on taking him for a bit of fun. "Hey, Green," Carl's lips curled up slightly, a malicious smile that, to Green, resembled the smile of a demon, sending chills down his spine. "Hello, Carl," Green replied tremblingly, his voice barely audible. He shrank as much as possible, trying to appear smaller, as if that would shield him from Carl's oppressive gaze. But he knew in his heart that he was in for another day of torture. Chapter 394. Green lowered his head, his body trembling uncontrollably. He was filled with fear and helplessness, hoping only for Carl to let him go. However, Carl had no intention of giving up. He had come here for fun, and seeing Green's cowardly appearance only intensified his malice. Carl suddenly reached out and shoved Green against the cabinet. Green's back slammed against the cabinet with a dull thud, and he gasped in pain. "I'm talking to you, you bastard. Look at me," Carl cursed fiercely. He reached out and grabbed Green's hair, pulling it up with such force that it seemed as if he was ripping it out by the roots, forcing Green to look him in the face. "You hurt me," Green said, tears welling in his eyes, his voice tinged with pain and grievance. "You hurt me," Carl deliberately mimicked Green's tone, his delicate and affected manner drawing laughter from the students watching the excitement. "You're a fucking pixie," Carl spewed even more vicious words, a sinister smile plastered across his face. He seemed to derive immense satisfaction from humiliating Green. The area was already crowded with students, some gloating, others with a flicker of pity, but ultimately no one stepped forward to help. They simply stood by silently, watching the unfair bullying unfold before their eyes. Humiliation and indignation filled Green's heart. He felt as if he had been stripped naked and thrown before everyone. He felt mortified, yet powerless to resist. He could only allow Carl to humiliate him. "Let me go," Green pleaded in a sobbing voice, his desperate voice faint in the clamor, as if it would be drowned out at any moment. "You're becoming more and more like a pixie." Carl listened to Green's pleas, but instead of relenting, he intensified his assault. The surrounding students also began to boo him, and the mingling laughter and jeers turned the small space into a living hell. Carl felt like he was being praised, like he was standing center stage, the center of attention. His excitement grew. Then, Carl began to pummel Green, his blows raining down like raindrops, each one laced with malice. Green could only curl into a ball, shielding his head and vitals with his arms, silently enduring it all. Unconsciously, the rage within him began to build, a rage surging deep within him like a volcano about to erupt. After an unknown amount of time, Green felt a surge of blood rushing to his chest, his eyes turning red, as if a mysterious power had awakened within him. "Enough," Green shoved Carl away with such force that he was caught off guard and took several steps back before regaining his composure. "Who gave you the guts, you bitch?" Carl, still spitting curses from his shock, failed to notice Green's sudden change of heart. However, some sharp-eyed students noticed. They stared at Green in surprise, whispering to each other, "What's wrong with his eyes? Is it some new type of contact lens? This guy is a freak." Green could no longer bear it. The anger, humiliation, and long-suppressed emotions within him burst forth in this moment. "Ah!" he cried out, and suddenly a laser beam shot out from his eye. Like the Grim Reaper's scythe, it instantly struck Carl. Carl didn't even have time to scream before the laser cut him in half. Blood splattered on the ground and cabinets around him, creating a bloody and horrific scene. The laser's power didn't stop there. It pierced the wall, leaving a large, charred hole. Cries of surprise emanated from the other side, clearly startling those next door. "Shit, what the hell is this?" The surrounding students were instantly thrown into panic. They screamed and fled in all directions, and the crowd that had been watching the excitement was instantly thrown into chaos. Green himself was startled by the sudden turn of events. He had no control over the force. The lasers shot out in all directions, killing several more students who were unable to dodge them. More walls were pierced, and the entire campus was filled with screams and cries, plunging into chaos and panic. "Did I do this?" Green stared at the horrific scene, his hands shaking uncontrollably, his eyes filled with horror and disbelief. At that moment, he felt a mixture of emotions: fear of the catastrophe he had caused, excitement, the incredible power he suddenly possessed. The media, hearing the news, rushed to the school in droves, reporters clutching microphones and cameras, eager to get the latest news. Police quickly rushed in, sirens piercing the air as they charged into the campus with loaded guns, attempting to control the situation. Even the military arrived, armored vehicles and military trucks parked outside the campus. Soldiers quickly assembled and advanced on the campus as if facing a major enemy. They soon understood what had happened. Although Green had acquired superpowers, he was only a teenager, mentally immature and unable to master them. With the combined efforts of the crowd, Green was quickly subdued. He was shackled, loaded into a police car, and then taken to a special prison reserved for those with special abilities who posed a threat to society. At first, everyone thought it was just an isolated case of someone with special superpowers, tragic but just an accident. However, what no one expected was that in just 1 week, nearly 100 similar incidents occurred in Washington state, and the frequency was increasing. The entire state was shrouded in a shadow of fear and anxiety. People didn't know where the next person with superpowers who lost control would appear, and they didn't know whether they would be the next victim. Chapter 395 Awakening. The people of Washington state were like frightened birds, their once peaceful lives shattered. An air of fear permeated every corner, and the streets were filled with anxious eyes. The once orderly public order had deteriorated drastically, with robberies, brawls, and other incidents rampant. It was as if the city had shed its civilized veneer overnight and plunged into a quagmire of chaos and disorder. The large-scale awakening of superpowers was clearly no accident. It quickly sparked a public outcry, with countless experts and scholars debating the matter. Some took an optimistic view, believing it to be a sign of human evolution. These experts excitedly expounded on their views on television, painting a bright future for humanity. However, the U.S. Secretary of State, with a weary expression on his face, turned off the TV. With a click, he silently refuted this blind optimism. "This is definitely not evolution." The Secretary of State rubbed his temple, his voice filled with deep fatigue and resignation. He knew that things were far more complicated than the experts claimed, and that a massive crisis lay hidden beneath the surface. "Of course," Tony said, frowning as he looked at a table in his hand, which contained data on the awakening of superpowers and a brief account of related events. "If it's evolution, it wouldn't be limited to Washington state." He looked up at the Secretary of State, his eyes brimming with wisdom and composure. As a man of extensive experience and keen thinking, he knew there must be complex reasons behind this. "What's your opinion?" The Secretary of State looked at Tony, a glimmer of hope igniting in his eyes. In this thorny situation, he desperately wanted to gain some useful insights and solutions from Tony. "It's man-made," Tony said firmly. His mind replayed the scenes of his previous encounters with Wes, and he became increasingly convinced that all this was related to Wes. However, he had no solid evidence to support his theory. The Secretary of State listened to Tony's words and sighed helplessly. "We agree with you." He'd been under immense pressure recently, facing a barrage of challenges daily, feeling overwhelmed and unable to find effective solutions. Even more troubling was the fact that those awakening superpowers weren't limited to ordinary citizens. Members of the military, politicians, wealthy individuals, and capitalists alike had also experienced them. Furthermore, the number was steadily increasing. According to incomplete statistics, it had already surpassed 10,000, and at this rate, it was likely to easily exceed 100,000. This was far from a good thing. The emergence of such a large number of superpowered individuals was like a bomb waiting to explode, bringing immense instability to society. The crucial question was how to manage these individuals, a daunting challenge. It's important to understand that these individuals awaken without warning, often unleashing powerful powers uncontrollably and without warning. This has resulted in numerous casualties, severe damage to urban buildings and public facilities, and incalculable property damage. Under existing law, these actions are undoubtedly illegal, making them criminals. However, dealing with them presents numerous challenges. Should they be imprisoned? Ordinary prisons simply cannot contain these individuals with superpowers. A moment's emotional outburst could easily lead to them breaking free, causing even greater chaos. Furthermore, with so many individuals, simply imprisoning them is a nearly impossible task. Simply handling cases involving these superpowered individuals consumes vast amounts of human, material, and financial resources from the U.S. government, leaving police and military personnel already stretched thin and overstretched. And if these individuals were to be incarcerated and guarded en masse, what difference would that make? Incarcerating and confining them would be like a concentration camp. If they did so, the United States would inevitably face strong international condemnation, putting it in a very passive position in international public opinion. American high-level officials had been debating the issue for a long time, each side holding its own view and arguing endlessly, unable to reach a mutually beneficial solution. In desperation, they turned to Tony for help. After all, Tony was considered one of the world's most intelligent people. Perhaps he could, with his wisdom, devise a solution to this dilemma. However, Tony himself felt a pang of difficulty. His brow furrowed, he sank into deep thought. He always saw things more clearly and far-sightedly than the average person. He seemed to foresee the dire scenario that the United States might face in the future, a nation torn apart, a fierce war between the awakened and the common people, fueled by fear and suspicion. America would be plunged into the mire of a second civil war, a horrific scene of devastation and devastation. How cruel, Wes. Tony pondered, almost certain that Wes was responsible. This was undoubtedly Wes's handiwork. At first, Wes, filled with rage, planned to destroy the entire state of Washington, using his devastating power to intimidate the United States and show them his might. However, just as he was about to act, an idea struck him, leading to a more ingenious yet even more sinister plan. The film he'd seen, in which Hydra harnessed a Mind Stone's power to artificially create beings with extraordinary abilities like Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, inspired Wes. If others could do it, then with the Power Stone and Reality Stone in his control, why couldn't he replicate the same feat, perhaps even more thoroughly? Even as Wes froze the entire state of Washington, his terrifying plan quietly unfolded. He secretly harnessed the unfathomable power of the stones to silently alter the genes of the entire population of Washington. This wasn't a simple genetic modification, it was a profound, deeply uncertain transformation, one that planted a ticking time bomb within every resident of Washington, regardless of gender, age, or social status. The unaware residents of Washington state continued to live their lives as usual, unaware that they had become part of Wes's plan. Their fate was completely rewritten in that instant, and the entire Washington state, and even the entire United States, were about to fall into unprecedented chaos and turmoil because of this crazy move. Chapter 396 Consequences. Destroying Washington state would indeed severely damage the U.S. government, causing it to suffer severe damage in a short period of time, plunging the economy, people's livelihoods, and other aspects into chaos. However, Weiss knew that doing so might actually unleash America's hidden potential, just as a spring compressed to its limit unleashes greater resilience. The U.S. might quickly rally its forces and unite against the external threat, which would be contrary to his expectations. However, the current approach, like cutting flesh with a blunt knife, slowly but steadily plunges the U.S. into a spiral from which it cannot escape. The price the U.S. will pay is simply incalculable. Social order will be disrupted, public security will deteriorate, the people will live in fear, and conflicts between various parties will continue to intensify. Those who have awakened superpowers come from different classes, backgrounds, and aspirations. Once they unite and realize the immense power they possess, they may actually secede from the US and establish their own country. In that event, the situation in the US and even the world will become even more complex, with conflicts of interest and power struggles raging. That will be a fascinating spectacle. After all, the United States is a multi-ethnic and diverse nation, plagued by internal conflicts. Disparate races and social classes often clash over resource allocation and rights protection. The arrival of these awakened individuals has undoubtedly added fuel to the fire, perhaps the final straw that breaks the camel's back, enough to tip the seemingly sturdy structure of the United States toward collapse. For Wes, the chance to both cause trouble for the United States and watch the drama unfold is a win-win. Putting aside the complexities behind this, even for someone as brilliant as Tony, resolving the thorny issue of superpowers is practically impossible. Human nature is inherently complex and ever-changing. Each awakened individual has their own unique desires and aspirations. Some may yearn to use their powers to protect themselves and pursue freedom, others may be blinded by power, seeking to exploit it for greater gain and power. Managing such a diverse group is no easy task. The US government, however, suspected Weiss was most likely responsible, but they couldn't find him. Even if they were lucky enough to find him, given the conflicting relationship between them and them, he wouldn't be able to help them resolve this mess. Desperate, they pinned their hopes on Tony, hoping this man of exceptional wisdom could work a miracle. "I need time," Tony said seriously, frowning. He didn't refuse. After all, facing a matter so crucial to the stability of the entire country, and even the world, he couldn't bear to sit idly by. He simply understood the immense difficulty involved and needed to carefully analyze his thoughts and explore possible solutions. "Of course, but please do it as soon as possible." The Secretary of State felt a wave of relief upon hearing Tony's response. His expression slightly softened. "We're under a lot of pressure right now," he said, wiping beads of sweat from his forehead. The torment he'd endured had left him exhausted. Tony nearly burst out in anger, secretly sulking. "You're under a lot of pressure? Isn't this all your fault?" If he hadn't provoked Weiss and had behaved properly, nothing would have happened. However, he still tried to suppress his anger and control his temper. After all, now was not the time to vent his emotions. The most urgent task was to find a way to deal with the crisis. Returning to Weiss, he and Vegapunk were in that mysterious, technologically charged place, discussing vibranium. "You want vibranium?" Weiss looked at Vegapunk with a hint of inquiry in his eyes. Vegapunk nodded repeatedly, his eyes filled with uncontrollable excitement. He couldn't wait to say, "This material is amazing. Whether it's for energy transmission, for creating high-strength equipment, or for many other scientific applications, it has unparalleled advantages." He rattled off a long list of vibranium's advantages, like a child finding a coveted toy. As a scientist obsessed with research, he certainly wouldn't miss out on such a perfect material, believing that if he could apply it to his own research, he would surely achieve many groundbreaking results. "I know it's expensive, but I only need a little." Vegapunk rubbed his hands together. Though he only needed a little, a hint of desire flickered in his eyes, a desire for more. "Is vibranium precious?" "Of course, it is. At a whopping $10,000 per gram, this exorbitant price is prohibitive for most, making it one of the world's rarest and most precious materials." But Weiss knew there was a place with abundant vibranium, Wakanda in Africa. To the outside world, Wakanda appears to be an extremely backward country, its people seemingly still in an agrarian society, living a traditional and simple life. The country's industrial base is near zero, unable even to manufacture a pencil, seemingly incompatible with modern civilization. However, this is all an illusion. The real Wakanda is a technologically advanced nation, possessing technologies far beyond the reach of the outside world. According to their own claims, they are far ahead of the world. To avoid unsettling the world with their own advancement, which would then lead to unnecessary conflict and trouble, they chose to remain hidden for the sake of world peace, disguising themselves as a less developed nation, silently guarding their technological achievements and vibranium resources. Weiss wasn't sure how to react to this approach, wondering, was it arrogance? A sense of superiority, a disdain for communication, leading to their seclusion? Or was it selfishness? Possessing such advanced technology and precious resources, yet unwilling to share them with the world, they sought to protect themselves and maintain a state of isolation and stability. Regardless, this was Wakanda's choice, and now, the existence of vibranium had piqued Weiss's interest, and he wondered what his next steps would be. Chapter 397 Wakanda. Across the vast African savanna, it was the time of the Great Migration, a truly spectacular spectacle. Herds of zebras, like a vast black and white wave, galloped past, stirring up clouds of dust. Buffaloes, with steady, powerful strides, herd after herd, their massive bodies converging like a moving fortress, a display of strength and power. For the hunters of the savanna, it was undoubtedly a feast, a chance to feast on the Great Migration and fully enjoy the bounty of nature's bounty. Weiss, with his lightning-fast figure, surveyed the scene from above. His eyes shone with a deep and complex expression, as if witnessing not only the vibrant spectacle of the animal migration, but also the entire cycle of life's birth, growth, and demise, a ceaseless cycle of birth, growth, and death. The laws of nature unfolded vividly across this vast savanna, leaving Weiss lost in a moment of contemplation. Then, with a flicker of his body, Wes descended from the air like a ghost, landing steadily among the lions. This sudden change of events instantly alerted the lions. Their previously lazy gazes suddenly became sharp, and they stared intently at the suddenly appearing biped. They circled him cautiously, emitting low growls from time to time, as if warning Wes not to act rashly. This was their territory, and it was untouchable. Just then, a young lion, as if having discovered something new, was captivated by the mysterious and vibrant patterns on Wes's robe. With a glint of curiosity in its eyes, it bounded towards them, completely oblivious to the tense atmosphere around them. Seeing this, the lioness growled anxiously from behind, trying to call the young lion back. It sensed an indescribable threat from Wes, an instinctive alertness that kept it on constant alert. The lion cub heard its mother's roar and looked back at her, pausing briefly. But the beautiful patterns on the robe held a profound allure. After a moment's hesitation, it continued running toward Weiss. "You're quite talented," Weiss said softly, a faint smile playing on his lips as he watched the lion cub approach. Most animals wouldn't be interested in the runes on his robe, but the lion cub's action surprised him, and even heightened his admiration. As he spoke, Weiss bent down, scooped up the little creature, and gently pressed his index finger against its forehead. A gentle stream of spiritual energy slowly flowed into the lion cub, seemingly imbued with some mysterious power, merging into its consciousness. After this, Weiss placed the lion cub back on the ground, looking at it with a gentle gaze. "See you again, if we're destined to meet again," he whispered. Then, he turned and left, quickly disappearing from the lion's sight. The little lion stood there, gazing bewilderedly in the direction Wes had left. Before he could react, the lioness quickly grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and carried him back to the pride. As she walked, the lioness glanced back in Wes's direction, her eyes still filled with vigilance. Wes continued on, and soon arrived at the border of Wakanda. From the outside, the place still looked quite backward, as if it were still a tribal era. The people wore traditional clothing, lived in simple thatched huts, and lived a simple, unadorned existence. An air of primitiveness permeated the air. However, this was all an illusion. Without hesitation, Wes headed straight ahead, crossing the seemingly ordinary border. In an instant, the scene before him transformed. The familiar African savanna remained, but it was now interspersed with a variety of high-tech gadgets. Advanced aircraft crisscrossed the sky, gleaming metallic smart buildings were scattered in an orderly pattern, and peculiarly shaped technological devices with diverse functions were everywhere. The fusion of unique African customs and high-tech elements creates a unique and futuristic atmosphere, resembling an African cyberpunk world. It's both eye-opening and captivating, yet also captivating, the magic and mystery hidden beneath the surface. Wes's appearance naturally aroused the locals' vigilance. They viewed this stranger with wariness, as outsiders were rarely allowed in this place. However, Wes seemed completely oblivious to his unwelcome presence, strolling through the streets with unrestrained confidence, glancing around and expressing keen interest in the technological displays around him, as if he were just another tourist admiring the novelty of a foreign land. Soon, news of the intruder reached the king of Wakanda. Wakanda has a unique tradition whereby each king inherits the name T'Challa. The current king, T'Challa, is a wise and righteous man. He once enjoyed a close friendship with Steve, even helping him hide the Winter Soldier's tracks, demonstrating their deep bond. Why is he here? T'Challa was taken aback upon seeing Wes's appearance. He knew full well that Wes was no ordinary man. Wakanda's intelligence organizations spanned the globe, and they had gathered extensive intelligence on Wes. They considered him an extremely dangerous individual, a monster with the power to destroy an entire nation. The sudden appearance of such a man in Wakanda cast a pall over T'Challa's heart. His brow furrowed in worry. "Don't confront him," T'Challa ordered with a decisive action. He knew that a head-on confrontation with Wes at this moment was unwise. The slightest misstep could bring disaster to Wakanda. He had to stabilize the situation first and make further plans. "I'll be right there," T'Challa said, quickly gathering his guards and heading in Wes's direction. Wes, on his part, had long sensed that he was being monitored, and there were quite a few of them, but since he saw no signs of action, he let them be. Soon, T'Challa arrived with his guards. Each member of the guards, serious-looking and armed with advanced weapons, stood guard around T'Challa, their gazes fixed on Weiss. Chapter 398 New Deal. "King T'Challa," Weiss asked, looking at the majestic king before him. T'Challa frowned slightly and asked, "I wonder what Mr. Irving's purpose is in coming to Wakanda?" His eyes were filled with caution. After all, he was still unsure of the sudden arrival of this outsider, and naturally felt a little wary. "Vibranium," Weiss stated his purpose directly without beating around the bush. Hearing this answer, T'Challa secretly breathed a sigh of relief. As long as they're not here to cause trouble, although Wakanda has always had strict rules prohibiting the outflow of vibranium, the rules were, after all, made by the king, and he was now king, naturally holding some power. "Please follow me," T'Challa thought for a moment before making his decision. Perhaps in the eyes of some Wakandans, their country is still that isolated, powerful, and mysterious nation, believing Wakanda to be the most powerful nation in the world. However, T'Challa had a clearer perspective. He knew clearly that times had changed dramatically. Many powerful figures had emerged on Earth, and Weiss was one of the most prominent. He was unwilling to offend Weiss and bring unnecessary trouble to his country. So, T'Challa led Weiss toward the interior of the palace. Along the way, Weiss curiously took in the exotic architecture and unique local customs, while T'Challa mentally pondered his next move. Soon, the two arrived at a secluded area within the palace. "How much vibranium does Mr. Irving need?" T'Challa asked Weiss sternly. "The more, the better," Weiss replied without hesitation, his tone brimming with determination. "No limit." T'Challa's eyes widened slightly, surprised. He hadn't expected Weiss's appetite to be so voracious. Of course, Weiss remained calm, as if speaking of a trivial matter. T'Challa suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. He frowned and said, "Vibranium is very expensive." In his view, vibranium was a precious resource in Wakanda. If it were provided to Weiss without restraint, it would be a significant loss to the country. No matter how expensive it is, it's more important than life. As Weiss said this, T'Challa's heart tightened. He thought Weiss was threatening him, and his face changed immediately. The guards standing around reacted immediately, gripping their spears tightly and quickly surrounding Weiss. "You misunderstood." Weiss realized that his words were indeed easy to misunderstand. He then calmly pulled a bottle of potion from his bosom and held it up to T'Challa. "This is a life potion. It can extend the life of an ordinary person by 5 years. Even those who are on their last breath can be saved by taking it," Weiss explained the potion's effects. T'Challa's heart was moved by these words. Honestly, he was quite tempted. You have to know that the stakes Wes was offering were enormous. If such a life-extending potion were released to the outside world, it would undoubtedly spark a frenzy of scramble. Furthermore, T'Challa knew that a proud man like Wes would never lie. Since he was so confident in the potion's efficacy, it had to be true. 5 years of life, that's an inestimable treasure for anyone. T'Challa could even feel his heartbeat quicken as he began to weigh the pros and cons. After all, in Wakanda, while vibranium was extremely rare in the outside world, it was relatively common within the country. It had long been woven into the fabric of Wakandan life, appearing in architecture, weapons, and much else. Deal. T'Challa pondered for a moment before finally making his decision. He felt he had no reason to refuse. While he and Steve were friends, he was also the king of Wakanda, shouldering the heavy responsibility of protecting the nation. He couldn't afford to compromise Wakanda's safety for the sake of personal friendship, risking the country's potential for war or other dangers. The two quickly reached an agreement, and the tension eased. T'Challa warmly invited Wes to stay and explore Wakanda, And after a moment's thought, Wes readily agreed. After all, Wakanda offered a unique culture and many mysteries, offering Wes a rare opportunity to explore the land. Over the next few days, T'Challa personally acted as his guide, taking Wes on a comprehensive tour of the country. They first journeyed through the bustling capital, admiring its distinctive architecture and absorbing the vibrant atmosphere of the Wakandan people. The streets were filled with people wearing colorful, ethnic clothing, selling a variety of exquisite handicrafts. T'Challa then took Wes to visit several other tribes. Each tribe had its own unique culture and traditions, some excelling in traditional song and dance. Some tribes preserved ancient craftsmanship. Watching the skilled artisans craft exquisite instruments, Wes couldn't help but marvel at Wakanda's rich heritage. They also visited Princess Shuri's laboratory, the heart of Wakanda's technology. Princess Shuri is truly a brilliant scientist. Her ingenious ideas and exceptional skills are truly admirable. Even the high-tech equipment T'Challa wears today is the product of her research and development. Finally, after some negotiation, Wes successfully exchanged 3 bottles of precious life potion for a large amount of vibranium. This amount of vibranium was substantial, sufficient for Vegapunk's next experiments. The two sides carefully agreed on the price and specific time for the next transaction to ensure the smooth progress of the cooperation. With everything settled, Wes left Wakanda. After Wes left, T'Challa immediately called Steve. Once the call was connected, he detailed Wes's whereabouts, saying with a hint of apology, "Sorry, that's all I can do, thank you, that's all I can do." Steve replied on the other end of the line, his voice still calm and gentle, as understanding as ever. He understood the difficulties T'Challa faced in his position, and even providing such information was a huge help, so his words were filled with gratitude. After the call ended, Steve, without hesitation, boarded a pre-prepared stealth fighter. With the roar of its engines, the fighter slowly took off from its base in Washington, quickly breaking through the clouds and disappearing into the blue sky. Steve had only one goal: to quell the chaos in Washington. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 Time Variance Administration. Temporal Variance Administration. Wes Erwin, you're under arrest, a shout rang out, and Wes frowned slightly, pausing to examine the group that had suddenly appeared before him. They were all heavily armed, wearing strange, uniform clothing and wielding what looked like stun guns, gleaming with a faint blue light. "Don't resist," the leader declared arrogantly, spouting what seemed to Wes like complete nonsense. His domineering demeanor seemed certain that Wes would surrender. However, Wes wouldn't be manipulated like this. His eyes glared, and he whispered the words, "Soul-stealing." The leader's mouth dropped open, but no words came out. He stood there blankly, his eyes blank. Weiss wasn't about to let him go. He stepped forward, reached out, gently placed his hand on the leader's forehead, and roughly began to scan his memories. As the memories flashed through his mind, Weiss came across a wealth of unfamiliar and shocking information: the multiverse, sacred timelines, time criminals. Something interesting, Weiss muttered to himself, speculating that perhaps his previous actions in Washington had changed the course of the world, thus attracting the attention of the Temporal Variance Administration. After a moment's thought, Weiss waved his hand, and a powerful burst of magical energy instantly transformed the Temporal Variance Administration agents into ash, dispersing into the air, leaving only their equipment on the ground. Weiss squatted down, picked up one of the so-called electric batons, and examined it carefully in his hands. The baton felt heavy, its surface covered in intricate and delicate patterns, emitting faint energy fluctuations. Perhaps the doctor would like it, he thought, and with a flash, he disappeared from the scene. Seconds later, another team of Temporal Variance Administration officers arrived. Surprisingly, Loki was among them. He looked nonchalant, observing the empty surroundings with a curled lip. "It's just a wizard, why are you so nervous?" Mr. Paradox observed his surroundings warily, his brow furrowed as he sighed. "We're still a little late." He knew Weiss's strength and understood that having missed the best opportunity to capture him, finding him again might be difficult. Is he really that difficult? Loki looked unconvinced. He prided himself on his abilities and never took others seriously. In his opinion, a mere wizard couldn't be that difficult. The Temporal Variance Administration officers were making a big deal out of nothing. "He's a real problem," Mr. Paradox said sternly. Weiss's abilities were beyond common knowledge. He was no easy opponent. Why not go back to the timeline when he was a child? That way, it'd be easy, Loki said, making a strangling gesture. His meaning was clear: if he could just go back and finish Wes off while he was still weak, wouldn't everything be fine? It's not that simple. Mr. Paradox shook his head helplessly, trying to explain the complexities to Loki. It took more than a few words to explain. So what should we do now? Seeing this, Loki knew there must be some intricacies he didn't understand. He dropped his nonchalant attitude and asked seriously, "Let's discuss this when we get back. I need to find some allies for you." Mr. Paradox pondered for a moment before making a decision. Meanwhile, at Vegapunk's research facility, Vegapunk carefully placed the electric baton sent by Wes on the operating table, preparing to disassemble it for analysis. After all, this was no ordinary weapon. It was a magical device capable of erasing a person's existence in time. In Vegapunk's eyes, this was something akin to the realm of the gods. Time, inherently fascinating yet dangerous, brimming with endless mysteries, could hold the key to unlocking its mysteries. His movements were cautious, his eyes filled with a thirst for exploration and focus. Weiss's recent battle with the Temporal Variance Administration kept replaying in his mind, his interest in this mysterious organization growing stronger. The power wielded by this organization seemed inextricably linked to time, one of the most mysterious and unfathomable entities in the world. "Next time, I'll try to capture a high-ranking official," Weiss muttered, his lips curling up slightly in a confident yet sly smile. He believed that the ordinary agents only knew the surface. If he wanted to truly uncover the secrets hidden behind the Temporal Variance Administration and gain a deeper understanding of the mysteries of time, the best way to start was to approach the higher-ups. If he could capture a high-ranking official, he could leverage his own skills to extract valuable information from their memories or words. Alternatively, he could simply infiltrate the Temporal Variance Administration directly. The thought flashed through Wes's mind, but it remained lingering. He reasoned that if he could sneak in unnoticed, he could explore their lair and perhaps uncover some core secrets about time manipulation. This could be a perfect opportunity for him to further enhance his abilities and grasp the mysteries of time. Excitement and anticipation gleamed in Wes's eyes, and he began mentally planning his next move. "I should proactively create opportunities," he thought to himself. Simply waiting for the Temporal Mutation Administration to come knocking again would be too passive. To achieve his goal, he had to be proactive and plan everything in advance. "And we have to prepare traps." Meanwhile, inside the Temporal Mutation Administration, Mr. Paradox returned with a solemn expression. The failure of this operation had made him realize that the current manpower was far from enough to deal with Wes. He already had a candidate in mind. Meanwhile, Steve, piloting his stealth fighter, sped towards Africa at lightning speed. Fighter planes streaked across the sky, leaving a faint trail in the blue sky and white clouds. Steve's eyes were determined and persistent, his only hope being to reach his destination as quickly as possible and prevent further danger. Unbeknownst to him, Weiss was already hatching a new plan, and the Temporal Variance Administration was about to be deployed again. A complex situation involving multiple parties was quietly forming on the African savannah. Chapter 400, War Begins. Ready, Weiss stood on the African savannah, his gaze gleaming with confidence and anticipation. He had meticulously laid his trap, now waiting for the Temporal Variance Administration to react, like a patient hunter, quietly waiting for his prey to fall into his trap. In a command room within the Temporal Variance Administration, the atmosphere was tense and solemn. An intelligence officer quickly reported to Mr. Paradox, "Sir, the target has appeared." His voice was remarkably clear in the hushed command room. "Lock his time." Mr. Paradox gave the order without hesitation. He knew Weiss's formidable ability. To successfully capture him, he had to first constrain him within the realm of time, absolutely denying him the opportunity to escape so easily as he had last time. "Yes," the intelligence officer immediately and expertly began working at the console, his fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard, data flashing across the screen. After a moment, a loud reply came, "Locked on." Mr. Paradox stared intently at Wes on the screen. As if sensing something, he flashed a provocative smile, as if to say, "Come on if you dare." This guy did it on purpose. Loki, watching from the side, warned with a frown. He knew that Wes's move was definitely intentional, and definitely not just a simple provocation. Mr. Paradox knew Wes was doing it on purpose, but he was confident in this carefully planned operation. After all, he had made extensive preparations for this arrest. Move, he decisively gave the order, his voice steady and forceful, with unquestionable resolve. Elsewhere, Wes raised an eyebrow and thought to himself, here they come. He keenly sensed that the surrounding spacetime had been locked. Then, several golden portals slowly opened, shimmering with a mysterious and dazzling light. Then, a group of Deadpools emerged from the portals, creating a scene of extraordinary variety and strangeness. There's the female Deadpool, agile and wielding twin blades, her eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity. There's the baby Deadpool, a strange-looking creature with an inexplicable aura of danger. And there's the cowboy Deadpool, wearing a cowboy hat, 2 revolvers strapped to his waist, and sporting the demeanor of a Western. It turns out Mr. Paradox has gone to great lengths to defeat Wes, gathering Deadpools from across the multiverse. And these Deadpools have one thing in common, they're all talkative. As soon as they appear, they're all barking. Are you Wes Erwin? There's nothing special about this guy. The cacophony is like the quacking of thousands of ducks, a constant chattering that nearly makes your head explode. Why haven't I seen you in a Marvel movie? What new character are you? You can ask Stan Lee. He's dead. Oh, no wonder Marvel stories keep getting more outrageous. Deadpool is the only Marvel character who can break the fourth wall and realize he's a comic book character, so this string of words perfectly showcases their unique and quirky style. Stop talking nonsense. I've been fed up with that handsome face for a while now. Tear him apart. The female Deadpool finally couldn't contain herself anymore. With a delicate cry, she drew her 2 blades and rushed towards Weiss like lightning. The blades slashed through the air, 2 streaks of cold light, heading straight for Weiss. Weiss remained calm. He flicked his finger, and a spark instantly flew from his fingertip. The spark seemed insignificant. But once it left his fingertip, it grew rapidly with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into a sea of fire, rushing towards the Deadpools, instantly engulfing them in a blazing flame. Ah, it's burning me, damn. I feel like I'm melting, even amidst the flames, scorching in excruciating pain. The Deadpools continued to spew out nonsense, constantly shouting out all sorts of whimsical and vulgar language. Their expressions were both infuriating and hilarious. Soon, the flames died down, and the Deadpools were reduced to ash, scattered on the ground in a black mass. But what was unexpected was that the next second, the Deadpool's flesh and blood regenerated at a visible speed. In the blink of an eye, they stood intact again, as if the scene of being burned to ash was just an illusion. Wes did not stop this recovery process, but stood aside and observed carefully. This is not a simple regeneration ability, it involves the principle of death, he pondered in his heart, realizing that the Deadpool's super-fast regeneration ability far exceeded the scope of ordinary superpowers. Damn it! You're hurting me. The Deadpools, reeling from the weight of gravity, continued to curse. The female Deadpool even yelled at the top of her lungs, her face thick with anger and resentment. But Wes ignored them, ignoring them completely. Arguing with these chatterbox Deadpools was a foolish act. Not only was it a waste of time, but their nonsense would only annoy him. For now, the more important thing was to focus on dealing with their attacks. Gravity 4x, Wes whispered these words, and instantly, an invisible force emanated from him, making the surrounding space feel heavier. The Deadpools, who had been clamoring, collapsed in a mass, as if pinned to the ground by an invisible hand. They struggled to get up, but it was difficult. While they were indeed immortal, their physical strength and power weren't particularly impressive compared to other superheroes. They were overwhelmed by the sudden surge of gravity. Oh, my knees! Some of the Deadpools couldn't help but scream out in agony. The increased gravity felt like a sledgehammer, constantly tormenting their bones. Every inch of their bones felt like being pierced by thousands of needles, the pain unbearable. 10 times the gravity. Weiss's eyes flashed, and he increased the gravity even more. Now, all the Deadpools were pinned to the ground, completely unable to move. The overwhelming gravity felt like a mountain bearing down on their heads, as if their bodies were being crushed. Their internal organs were constantly being damaged by the immense pressure, yet their miraculous regenerative abilities constantly repaired them. This cycle repeated, alternating between pain and a strange pleasure. Some Deadpools even cried out in pleasure from the twisting sensations. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.